you ever feel alone in the culture war, or see everything around you crumbling to ashes and dust, and you're kind of tired of it, but you feel like there's no one out there that would support you? Well, I've got 3 sites that actually might change your mind. So first we have MetaPCs. MetaPCs is a fantastic PC making company. They'll have pre-mades, they'll have all sorts of customs that you can make. You can get cases, possibly engravings and all that type of stuff. Like whatever you want, they can get it working for you. And they've got some pretty snazzy stuff. So check out MetaPCs. You can use the Geeks and Gamers code, which is 199, in order to get a percentage off of whatever you want to purchase. Check them out. Another one that's also really good is DEG Mods. DEG Mods and Ayaka Mods, which I will show you in a second, both share a common enemy in Nexus Mods. So if you've ever tried modding a game, Nexus Mods has been more pro-censorship and not allowing you, the gamer, to pick what you want to pick, play what you want to play, and mod your game the way you want to mod your game, because they don't believe you have the right because it might be politically inconvenient for them. So both DEG Mods and Ayaka Mods are both alternatives, and there are others, but these are the 2 main ones that I've heard about that can definitely change your view on who's out there and who's supporting what you yourself are looking for in any type of game or otherwise. Modding sites can be not safe for work, so please use your own discernment and know that you're not alone. There are other people like myself and Geeks and Gamers, Nerdrotic, and the hundreds if not thousands of other channels that are trying to do something good in the YouTube sphere against this pretty nasty counterstroke against us. So check out those 3 sites if you are interested in supporting those that support us. I make no money off of this. This is purely because I support what they do. So have a great day. Welcome, my friends and enemies. Glad you are here. I am joined by Supreme Inquisitor Intellectus.
Yep.
Or not Intellectuous, but okay. Either way.
You only fit so many letters there.
Abbreviations. Anyway, we have, sadly, a bit more of a serious topic, and this is going to be interesting, but there is what I personally would consider a concerning thing. I don't think Matt shares the same concern on this topic, but in the terms of, I guess we'll just jump straight into it, is the Stop Killing Games initiative, which I don't necessarily, I guess I don't have to agree with the way it's being implemented to agree with the concept of it, and or maybe the way it's being integrated is accurate. But this is a movement in which, well, I guess I'll just read it and make it easier. Stop Killing Games is a consumer movement started to challenge the legality of publishers destroying video games they have sold to customers. An increasing number of video games are sold effectively as goods with no stated expiration date, but designed to be completely unplayable as soon as support from the publisher ends. This practice is a form of planned obsolescence and is not only detrimental to customers, but makes preservation effectively impossible. Furthermore, the legality of this practice is largely untested in many countries. Over the past year, we have successfully escalated complaints on this problem to consumer agencies in France, Germany, and Australia, and have brought forth petitions for new law on this problem to various countries. A list of all the actions taken to date can be viewed here, which is a hyperlink. As of 2025, most consumer action on this matter has concluded, and we are awaiting decisions on it from several governments. However, there are a few remaining avenues left where people can participate if they are eligible, and unfortunately, this is pretty much exclusively for European Union citizens, so everybody else's hands are tied. Now, the concept is something I agree with, where a company will offer something like a single player game and then have a live service feature like a multiplayer or a leaderboard or something like that attached to it. And then that leaderboard and live service function will cease to exist whenever they take the servers down. However, there's still a single player mode. There are still other modes that do not require online, or you prevent them from making it an online only when it's a single player game. Like if it has a single player game mode, why would I need to be connected to online in order to play single player mode? That kind of a thing. Or when they like install anti-cheat software on things that are single player because you're the only person playing, so you either ruin your own experience or you don't. Like that's up to you. You're the sole person who's affected by it. It makes sense when it comes to things like multiplayer. It doesn't make sense if it's a single player. But it also is not okay for them to just put whatever anti-cheat system they want into it because it could potentially affect the gameplay by slowing down systems, being too over. What's the term? Help me out, Matt.
Sluggish or
Well, no, like overbearing, I guess is the term I'm looking. It's more overbearing, and it does a lot more than just prevent cheating. It like spies on you and stuff like that.
oh yeah, there's like Blizzard, for example, has a if you play World of Warcraft, any Blizzard game, it's spying on you to prevent you from cheating, as they say. You know.
Yeah, but they're also using it to build up, more like things they can sell to ad revenue.
Well, that's anything in your Windows environment then.
Yeah, well, I know, but I'm saying like these things are not okay. It's just they're allowed to be okay because
or your Google environment or your Apple environment. All three of them do it.
Yeah, I know, and I'm saying they shouldn't be able to do that without our consent. And since they do it all the time, with or without our consent,
that's the issue that comes down with online, activation, and you don't own your stuff. You don't own your software anymore, and all that.
Yeah, licensing should disappear, in my humble opinion. But that's a different story. I'm not going to bring that into
Well,
this. So,
I solved the problem by my primary. I run Linux on or other free software when
yeah, until Linux decides, you know what, we can make a lot of money, and then they just start doing the same thing because
they can't because it's open source.
I mean, it doesn't stop anybody from leaking it in there.
Well, there are companies that are like Fedora, for example, and is a purely commercial Linux, but you can still run it open source for free.
Sure.
Like they can't charge you for the operating system, but they can charge you for their support. Basically, what they do, and so the problem with Microsoft or I don't want to.
There's a lot of problems with Microsoft.
I don't want to blame Microsoft because their products, are actually very good. Okay.
Sometimes.
Well, in general, like Windows. Windows works remarkably well, and I'd say this as someone who has used Microsoft operating systems.
It depends on which Windows. To be fair.
Well, I'm speaking broadly. I have used Microsoft products, operating system products, since like 1982. Okay, and some versions of it have sucked, but most versions of them have been okay at best.
The rule is usually every other.
Well, what I'm making is, for the most part, as a company, they produce products that work well or okay, and when they make a mistake, they recover in the next version or whatever, right? Unfortunately, since and I'm not defending Bill Gates because he's a commie, but since he left, and then Ballmer ran up after him. After Ballmer, the guy who took over, the people who took over running Microsoft, have turned it into a very like this whole corporate communism thing where they want to know all the shit going on your PC and all that sort of stuff.
Well, they feel entitled to your stuff because you're using their product. And
And
again,
I personally decided, and I don't game a lot anymore, although some of that's a health issue. My hands just hurt too much. Is I'm done. When Windows 10 came out, there was some privacy issues, but you could turn most of that off. And if you knew how to do it properly, you block a couple things with the software.
Yeah, and also those things are sometimes things you can get around because somebody out there can create a program that will block those things and all that kind of stuff.
Well,
there's always something that can be done, technically speaking, about it.
Well, the problem is Windows 11. It's virtually impossible to do so without being someone who you have to actively, like every time they produce an update, you have to go in and again isolate your system.
To be fair, it that's a good business opportunity for somebody who knows how to do that type of stuff. They can go and
Well,
say,
well
yeah,
what's happening?
I'll protect your computer privacy for,
Well, what
$40 a
seems
year or
to be
something. I
happening
don't
is
know.
that Linux penetration since Windows 11 came out has been increasing notably. So I personally switched to Linux. I have two Windows 10 PCs in my
Well,
house.
that's one of the things I am looking forward to is the Steam OS, and this is going to change the whole thing. But basically, Steam OS has the potential to completely outdo Windows 11 in every way possible. And if they manage to pull it off, we'll just switch to Steam OS, and Steam OS is going to be less because it has to be optimized for
Well,
everything to
SteamOS
work.
will probably be free because it's Linux.
Well, that too, but it's already free. Like you can go download Steam OS.
Yeah.
But I'm saying if they make the Windows equivalent of the entirety of Steam OS, which is basically what it is, but they make it with an ease of use system that anybody who uses Windows, because like I'm not particularly familiar with Linux, but if we do manage to make Steam OS as easy to use as a Windows PC, even in Linux, that will short circuit Windows hardcore because people who are like, why
Well,
is my Windows 11 like
no,
slowing me
because
down and this, that, and the other? And Steam OS is like, it's
uh,
pretty much the same thing, but it doesn't have all the
the,
other junk in it.
this is a issue. So the reason Windows will always have a large base, or always under the current economic system have a large base, is because isn't it because the majority of people like you or me who use PCs aren't the majority.
Well,
The
yeah,
majority of
normies will
PCs are
always outnumber
basically
the
like
people who actually care. Yes.
are not to actually care. They're what I would call workplace convenience PCs. Basically,
Sure.
like when you're in a hospital or you're in a other business or whatever, on any
They're still using
given
stuff from
unit.
like the 70s because they're stupid. Medical
No,
industry is really stupid in theirs.
that's a myth. That's nothing.
As being
Those
hyperbolic, it's
legacy systems, those legacy systems aren't because of stupidity. It's because of other reasons, which are beyond the scope of this discussion.
sure.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I'm aware of those, but I'm
Yeah,
just saying
but the
hyperbolically,
reason is
they don't upgrade their stuff because one, they claim it's too much money as they charge you nickels
well,
and
no.
dimes to your death. But whatever.
Again, let's keep it like it's accomplished. I've been part of those upgrades. Like I don't want to. I've been
Yeah.
expertise in that area. Anyway, so the reason because like in a hospital, for example, you have to install a whole bunch of PCs for people to be able to check their email, to type documents up and whatever. And it's much easier. And you two choices, right? Well, used to have two choices. Um, One was you basically pay Microsoft $1 million or whatever for an enterprise license to run Windows on all your PCs, and then you get full Microsoft support for any of the problems. Or the other option was you basically installed the name thin clients, right? And thin clients,
Hate thin clients.
um, well, hate them, but whatever. You don't have to pay for local PC licenses for Windows. You just pay for the server license to run Microsoft VMs, so that
I know.
when you load your thin client, they get their email client or whatever, right?
Yeah, but then you
Now,
have to have a security or not security, a tech team that's not completely moronic, and all the ones I've worked with
well,
have been
again,
completely moronic. But that's a different
the
story.
reason Windows remains present on all, and that's the bulk of Windows, is because companies don't want to maintain a Linux team to maintain their own
Sure.
Linux
Yeah,
implementation,
I know.
right?
Companies want convenience; they don't want
Yeah.
quality. But
So,
let's pull it kind of somewhat back to the topic, otherwise we're
well,
never going to get through
I'm
it.
about to get there. So the Windows remains predominant because all that money goes to Microsoft, and they can basically make Windows a sort of generic operating system for everyone based on that one revenue stream. You know.
Yeah. Well, and it the way I see it is that these companies that are doing these things, whether they be game developers or software developers like Microsoft or whatever, they're doing this because they find it beneficial because they can rescind things from people and then they can focus on something else and then they want to sell you temporary entertainment so that they can pull the rug underneath you at any moment in time and force you to move to something else, because if they left it there and you could consistently go back to it. And I believe Mudahar, when he did his video on this topic, he brought up Need for Speed 2015, and basically you could play the game in single player mode, but they made it completely online requirement. So if you just kept playing Need for Speed 2015, you wouldn't have to go to any of the more modern ones, which means you're not buying more games from them down the further line. It's the FIFA argument where The morons that play FIFA and Madden are going out there and buying the next thing, even though it's literally just the same thing with some minor differences like stats or
Well,
player names. It's the same thing over and over time, and then all they're doing is selling you basically a live service.
But see that's again, I agree in broad concept, but saying that they're mindless, that's part of the sports culture. Is every year you reset the whole system.
Sure, but even the people there will say that, yeah, I just do it because it's the newest thing. That's literally the definition of mindless. They're not doing it. They're not doing it because it's actually better than the previous one. Because most of the ones I've heard talk about is like, yeah, it's the same as the year before, and the year before, and the year before, and the year before, but I don't care. And it's like, that's fine. You don't care. That's fine. Lots of people don't care about being mindless. That's just, it is what it is. But in terms of it being mindless is non-negotiable. Like they admit it themselves. It's normal, and that's the normie world. Is I just want to have fun and entertainment with whatever's the newest shiniest object is. Sure, but that doesn't change the fact that that's how they make their money. Is because they're making them live service, so you have to buy DLC from them, and then they just nickel and dime you through a billion DLCs. Once upon a time, we had this complaint about Paradox when they would make a billion like Crusader Kings 2 DLCs, and it just cost like $3,000 to buy all the DLCs and stuff. It's like, oh, that's a problem. So then they kind of made them a little bit more condensed, so you're not paying nearly as much, but you can still benefit. But they didn't like completely take advantage of that, because Paradox, you can go, one person who hosts the game buys all the DLCs, everybody else can participate in that DLC as long as that person's hosting, which is really nice.
Yeah.
Other games like Civ don't do that, which is scumbag move in my opinion. But that's why I like Paradox more than like Firaxis. But if you have a game like Need for Speed 2015, why would I go buy something? It's still a good looking game, so it's not like the graphics aspect will be that much of a difference. But if all I wanted to do is race and do all these kind of things, I could just keep playing that game. They don't like that, so they'll make it a live action, or not live action, a live service, and then they can pull the plug on it. You lose access to 2015 Need for Speed. Now you have to go buy another one because you don't have it. It's not like it's there actively at all times, even if it's a single player non-online game.
Again, there's a whole like this issue with like different types of games. Like, for example, I read an article. I want to say, well, when do we filmed last week? Obviously, right?
Yeah.
So I think I read this article on like Thursday after we recorded it last week.
Okay.
There's about 10 great games you can't play anymore. Mm-hmm. And a couple of them were MMO games that basically the servers went down permanently, right? Yeah. But if you had bought them back then, you might have invested $200 or whatever, or more in that, let's say, and now you can't ever play that game again unless you could find someone who a hack copy of the server software, like
which somebody in the pirate world probably does.
Well, World of Warcraft, which I've invested like probably more than $2,000 in by now, over the years. If they took it down, I know there are private servers I can find,
which apparently are against terms of service, but whatever.
Well, they are, but the economy is such that, like, even now I can log on to private servers and play World of Warcraft. I would have to do it with I would have to make a separate install so that Blizzard cannot detect the one that
you'd have to go through a lot of loopholes to get through it, so they don't just can your entire account and you lose all your money.
Yeah, it's not that difficult, but I don't play on private servers currently. I would do so if I wanted to continue to play the game. The point is, that's one type of software. Now another type is what you were saying, where they change it to an online game when it was a standalone type of game.
Well, no, they would have things like online servers so you could race other people or something. Like, basically, they could patch it out, and that was one of the arguments for Stop Killing Games, is that they can patch these things so that they could become peer-to-peer, or they could become... there's I don't know if you've ever heard of Game Ranger, but Game Ranger is a software that basically creates a peer-to-peer connection between games, like the old before we have the now current Battle from Earth stuff that you had Age of Empires 2, Battle from Earth, and all that stuff. The old games,
peer-to-peer gaming as a networking point. I used to set that stuff up, so I know.
Well, I know, but Game Ranger does it automatically. Like, they have just like a list of games. You go to that thing, you find a lobby somebody's in, and it'll like basically connect the two games. And so when you launch the game,
I get the software.
So that's what I'm saying, is that you can do that. They could patch that, so that I could still run it as a single player, and they wouldn't have to be in charge of any like server behavior or anything. They would have to pay a constant maintenance fee for it. They could just throw it in as it is, and I could choose to do what I want with it by if I want to go Game Ranger, or if somebody else makes another equivalent of Game Ranger for that particular game.
I'm in agreement with you on the concept that will be a good thing.
So I'm saying that's what they're arguing, is that if you're going to do the live service thing that you will eventually shut down, because it's a purchase, it's not a license, it's not a rental, and from what I understand, they're not even trying to do this retroactively. They're only doing it from now and continuing on.
The legal change
I'd argue backwards too.
The legal change I would make here, it'd be very narrowly tailored, would be because under copyright and trademark law, you have to actively defend your trademark and copyright, but you must continue. This is in the law. This is right of Adam Smith, by the way. We mentioned it before. We had a big discussion before the show about.
Let's not bring that up in the show. We'll get derailed for hours.
This comes out of his writing, by the way. Trademark, trademark and IP and copyright protection is something he wrote extensively about.
I agree more or less with Shad when it comes to copyright trademarks.
So one of the core elements of copyright is that you not only must you actively defend it by saying stop stealing my stuff, you must actively put your product on the market. So you can't, for example, if I have a copyright on a book, let's say.
But they'll do that by releasing Need for Speed 2025.
Well, again,
they won't. You'll still lose Need for Speed 2015. They'll just make, because they're protecting the IP by perpetually adding more and more of the IP.
Well, what I would say
that's the FIFA argument.
Okay, I would make the argument legally. You would say creating a new version of a game does not protect the old version. So you must either.
Well, sure, but it protects the IP. It doesn't protect that particular.
But then what you would do, let's say Need for Speed. Let's use Need for Speed because you mentioned it, right?
Yeah. 2015 specifically.
So let's say you made Need for Speed 2025, right? Mm-hmm. And you the base is Need for Speed 2024, right? So you would say I would say your copyright over. You would have a copyright to the final version of Need for Speed 2024. However, if you're going to continue that IP, meaning not the game mechanics, but the actual lore of the game, which is the IP, right? You would, because you can't copyright game mechanics. That's a law, by the way.
Unless you're Pokemon.
Anyway, that's Japan. You would have to put into the public domain the core game itself, but you would strip it of all like the name, all the it would have to be a generic version of that game. You know what I mean? So that people like you and me want to play that game without using the online services could continue to play that game. But we would be called Need for Speed 2. It would be called Open Source Speed 1 or whatever. You know.
Open source speed.
And the model, like the car models in the game, will be turned into generic car models that you and I could then
you could mod them or customize them. Yeah.
But the underlying software.
But then they're like, well, then you can't make money off of it. Then you can't do this. You can't do that. And it gets really crazy. And it's just like, okay, look.
No. Once it's open source, though, then it could become an exploitable thing for you to make. Like you can make a mod that puts Ferraris in the game and say, well, it's open source. I'm not going to charge you for it, but I appreciate a donation.
Would you consider a game where a company stops performing the live service type of mentality? Like they're like, we're no longer going to be hosting the servers for this game and we're taking it offline. Would you consider that abandonware? Is that the proper term?
Yes.
Okay. So from my perspective, because I want to make sure I'm using abandonware as a term properly, from my perspective, if it's abandonware, they don't hold any rights over it.
Well,
for that particular product specifically, not the entire IP, obviously.
So let's break this down. Morally, we are in agreement. Ethically, we probably are in agreement. Legally,
legality can be changed, so that's not even an issue.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. Adam Smith again said, ethically, you must not only enforce your copyright, but you must put it into the market.
Yeah, well, I'm saying things like when somebody makes when EA, back when it was EA Games, Challenge Everything, Zip, they had access to make Battle for Middle-earth, Lord of the Rings, Battle for Middle-earth, and Battle for Middle-earth 2, and Rise of the Witch King expansion for Battle for Middle-earth 2. However, they lost the license for Lord of the Rings, so they could no longer sell said product. In my opinion, They bought the Lord of the Rings license, but they should also have rights to the Lord of the Rings Battle from Earth and Battle from Earth 2 and Rise of the Witch King in perpetuity, or perpetuity, whatever the term is, perpetuity.
Well, that
Because
gets
they should be
complicated.
able to sell that because they bought the license. They paid the company to have whatever they made in the time frame that they made, and whatever they made in that licensed time period should be something they can sell at any point in time for as much as they want,
Well,
whenever they want.
the problem there is, again, when you license to something else, right? And I would be perfectly fine with Battle for Open Source Earth out there, and
Well,
then you can
they have an
modify it.
abandonware version of it, which is the one I play. That
But then the modders can come in and say,
Yeah,
okay,
the modders
we'll
are
get,
what it came in and put everything together. They made an all-in-one launcher. I have it in my Discord with a
yeah.
very
Well, the
detailed
modders could
set.
also put the lore elements back to Lord of the Rings.
No, I mean, like, it's literally just the game, but they've tweaked it and updated it. And it's completely free. They're not selling it or anything, and they
No, but
just put it out
I'm
there.
not. What I'm saying to you is because it's Battlefront is a game that itself licensed a third party IP. That the open what I would support is when Battlefront is being abandoned, where the underlying game mechanics and programmability that's what goes into public domain, and then it will be Battle for Open Source Earth. There will be no
But
photos or
not even
whatever in
that.
there.
Like, you shouldn't have to do that. It's just you abandon your product, therefore you have no say over that product ever. Like that,
Again,
if you
but
abandon it, then that's the case.
but their product is not Lord of the Rings. Their product is a game based on Lord of the Rings.
I know, but that's what I'm saying is that the IP of the Lord of the Rings, that they buy a license because they buy the license explicitly for a video game. They don't buy it like where Amazon bought the rights to make a TV
Well,
show.
no, but you also buy it with the duration. In other words, like when you want to make a Lord of the video game, you say, I want to license like the Silmarillion or whatever for 10 years.
Sure.
There's always a termination date.
Yeah.
So
The termination is the window you have to make as much as you want in that time period. But
well,
what you
but,
make in that should not disappear at the end of the 10 years. That's my point.
but again, the point is, at the end of that 10-year period, let's say you decide you're the company you made, you know, uh, uh, I don't know, World of Frodo, where you pilot Frodo around Middle Earth and whatever.
I call that Lord of the Rings Online, but yes.
At the end of 10 years, your Lord of the Rings license is up, and you can say, and then you say to yourself, okay, do I want to get a new Lord of the Rings license so I can keep World of Frodo going, or do I want to abandon it, just
But
put this
that's
game on
my
the
point,
shelf?
is that they shouldn't be like, we have to shut down World of Frodo because the license ran out. It was built during the license, therefore they should never have to down it. Now, they can't add to it, but they can still run it. Like,
Well,
whatever they build in that 10-year period or whatever it is, that's theirs. They can run it for in perpetuity,
no.
literally
Okay,
forever.
let's make sure we're doing the same thing. So let's say you and I buy World of Frodo. Okay,
Sure.
our copies of World of Frodo should work. Should, in my view, assuming it's not really an online game, was calling it World of Frodo. Okay,
I mean,
it's
even if
just
it
a
was an online
standalone
game, I
game.
would still say yes.
Let's start with the simple though. It's a standalone game with the ability to play online. Okay,
Okay. Yeah.
when the Lord of the Rings copyright runs out, our version of the game should still work because we did not purchase it with a time limit. We purchased it in perpetuity to pilot
I'm not
Frodo.
even talking that. I'm saying the company, if the company is still running the game and they have no intentions of dropping said game, and the live the live servers and everything are
Yeah.
still there, they don't have to shut those down. They don't have to close the game because they purchased the license to make something. They made said thing within the time frame of the license, and it's like if I go buy a license to put I don't know, World of Frodo on a spatula, right?
Yeah.
And then for 15 years I make spatulas with World of Frodo on it. At the end of the 15 years, I have spatulas with World of Frodo on it. I can do that forever. I can't make a new version, like I can't make an HD rework of the World of Frodo on the spatula. I can't make the spatula with, I don't know, freaking crazy sci-fi stuff where I can shoot lasers and cut specific
Yeah.
World of Frodo into pancakes or something. I can't add to it. but I have the thing I purchased that, or I shouldn't say I purchased.
Wait, are you the? But are you saying that you are the company making the World of Proto spatulas, or are you the person who
Yes,
bought?
the company.
Okay, so but they are licensed to get Lord of the Rings runs out at a certain point. So
Yes, but I'm
under
saying
the
if the license for World of Frodo runs out, they can still sell that thing because in that license time period,
well, okay,
they
so
they made the stuff. If they made 50 different, or if I'm making World of Frodo spatulas, and within the, like, let's say I did it for 6 months. In 6 months, if I
okay, so we have
design,
exact actual examples of this product of this type of thing we can talk about. Okay,
I don't have anything off the top of my
well,
head
I
that I can
do.
work.
Okay, I
Okay,
can I
sure.
do off the top of my head because
I was
at
just
one
trying to
point.
pick something in terms of reference of when the company buys a license to something, whatever they make within that
Well, I'm going to
license,
give
they
you.
should be
I'm
able
going
to
to give you
do it
concrete
for.
examples. Okay,
Okay, go.
so I played a lot of pen and paper role playing games over the years. Okay,
I don't believe it.
there's a company called Palladium Books. Ever heard of Palladium Books? They're most famous for Riffs.
Not off the top of my head. I didn't really get into the
Uh,
books until
well,
recently.
the most famous game of their own creation is Riffs. But one of the Palladium Books, yeah, Riffs. But one of the other things they're famous for is they had some very popular licensees for third-party games. They had the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game at one point. Um,
I only
they,
have I have the Witcher books, the whole
they
series.
had
I've got the One Ring series and the new 5e.
yeah, they had the Robotech license at one point for probably the most popular game of all time in some respect is their Robotech game. Okay, now
Hmm.
when their license for Robotech ran out, they could no longer print those books.
I
Right,
disagree with that.
just bear with me, but that was specifically something. Well, they put into that license that Harmony Gold required.
Well,
That was in
sure,
that
that they
Robotech
put that in the
license.
license, yes, but I'm saying
Right?
that that should have never been in the license.
But when they had another property, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, they had in the contract because they had more power over when they got this license when Ninja Turtles weren't big. Even after the license ran out, they were capable. They could still print their version of the game. They just couldn't make add-on more additions to it.
Yeah, that's what I believe. That's what I think.
So they had a different licensing agreement for two different properties, right?
Yeah, I'm just
Now,
saying
many
that
years later,
I'm saying that, like, if they want to make TMNT stuff, they can make the TMNT stuff that they have made. They can't make more since they are outside of the license anymore. They can't make new ones. They can make the new of what they've already produced. They can't make new as in like a different book with a different story with the characters and everything like that. Like it would be like I've made Fellowship of the Ring, but I ran out of the
again,
license, so I can't
but
make
see,
Two
the point I'm
Towers.
trying to
That
get to
kind of a
here is
thing.
this one company had two different licenses because
Sure.
in one case the Harmony Gold had a lot of economic power more
Mm-hmm.
than uh, Palladium did, and the other case the guy who owned Teenage Mutant Turtles just wanted money.
Sure.
Um, then years later they got the Robotech license back. At that point, Robotech was in a very no in an economic powerful place. Now, even though when the license runs out, Kevin and the team said we'll be able to continue making Robotech products because we got to their agreement even after our license runs out because
Sure.
basically because we're more powerful than economically, right? So that's an example of what we're talking about in the software industry.
And I'm saying my argument is that licenses should be like the TMNT version you mentioned. That's
But the thing is,
exactly what I'm
the
saying. Like,
license is part of the negotiation, is what I'm saying. Okay.
I understand that, but I'm saying that negotiation is literally culling products. That's the problem.
But that's just the way it works. Like
I,
another
I I
example.
understand that's just the way it works, but we've had other conversations earlier of things the way the world just used to work back in ancient times. That's because it's the way things work does not necessarily mean that's the way it should work.
Well,
But
again, okay, so there's a hard breaking point in 1776 with the ancient world and the modern world. Okay,
well, it's more of a soft breaking point, but yeah,
no, it's pretty hard because in 1776,
that's what she said.
the greatest what was the I guess you would say the impregnation of the greatest nation of the history of the universe. And then in 1790, the greatest nation emerged from the womb on the world.
It
You know,
was the impregnation red, white, and blue. Sorry.
yes, it was a bald eagle impregnating the land.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
the point I'm getting at is there's a lot of stuff that the United States took the best of from before and chucked the worst of. You know,
Sure.
So
And there's some things
anyway,
that they kept that should not have been kept. My point.
well, yeah, but we've been fixing that over the years with amendment.
Fixing
Anyway,
is a bit of a word.
anyway.
That's a word.
So when I say the way things work, I mean in the context of the U.S., which has functional laws and governmental structures to improve things over time, not in the context of like I don't know, a country like Iran that throws gay people over roofs.
But what I'm
You know?
saying is that you could literally solve the license problem by just saying all license agreements are this. You can argue for how long they last.
But do you really want that? I mean,
Yes.
I don't know that I personally
I want to reduce the copyright and trademark power. Absolutely.
I don't necessarily want to.
I'm not
that.
saying I wanted to completely remove it. I'm just saying it needs to be greatly reduced from like, oh, I made this character 100 years later. Now it's going into public domain. That's a bit excessive.
Well, it's lifetime of the author plus their immediate heirs. I mean, that's what it amounts to.
And again, that's a bit excessive because not only does it create stagnance in the system, because like once Tolkien's work goes public domain, everyone's gonna have a free fall. Like they're gonna have a freaking field day with it.
Why do you think that flurry of economic activity is happening with Tolkien IP right now?
Because I know, but here's the thing. Here's the thing, though. With that flurry, it's going to happen. It will not be stopped. But what it does is it drives, like, let's say, obviously, the Tolkien estate will still have, they can still do stuff with the Tolkien estate, obviously. But if they make something, they have to compete with other things or other people. And it might be people who do terrible stuff like Rings of Power. Like, let's say Amazon didn't have to pay for Rings of Power and they could just make Rings of Power because, the copyright's gone. Yeah, sure, they could make a terrible Rings of Power series. However, somebody else, like you or me, if we had the backing and we had the finances or whatever, and we go out and we make a very accurate, very well done live adaptation of Tolkien's work, we're the competition with those other companies. And that means they have to do better than us in order to make something better, which will draw in more people. That's how it's supposed to work. But when you have that lock on it for that long, well, then it disappears.
Yes, but you see, what you need to understand is the vast majority of intellectual properties are not Lord of the Rings. Okay.
Sure, but I'm saying any property is that way.
The vast majority of intellectual properties, and this is an important part, okay, are either zero profit or losses, and the next biggest group are like a little bit of money trickles in. And
well, again, it's risk reward. That's literally any business.
Copyright and trademark are designed to protect not Lord of the Rings, but to protect you or me who might write a book and make $100 a month off of it. Okay. And
if I make $100 off of my book, I'd be surprised.
Well, I mean, you know what I mean. Though. I mean,
that's lifetime.
But you understand what I mean. Like, if we write a book and self-publish Amazon and make enough, and 5 people a month buy it for $10 a copy or whatever, that's $50 a month in our pocket. And that if
maybe like $2, but yes.
Say Rock Publishing would have come along and just publish it and not steal it and publish it, copyright protects us from that. It doesn't protect Lord of the Rings because Lord of the Rings has so much fucking money.
Well, yes, but I'm saying like if you put 10 to 20 years copyright protection on something, that's reasonable. 100's a bit excessive.
But you can't make a law based on the extreme like Lord of the Rings. Okay.
Why not?
So what if I mean, okay, here's an example. I mean, God forbid this doesn't happen to your family, but let's say like I have a friend who has a daughter who's now she's an adult, but she's severely developmentally disabled, right?
Yeah.
And he has a book he wrote that he draws. He had a pension that pays for most of his life and supporting his family. But his book pulls in for him. We're talking about, I want to say like $25, $30 a month right now.
Sure.
Sells a couple copies. It's a self-published book, right?
Okay.
And that he puts that little bit of money towards taking care of his daughter.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, let's say he was a little more successful if that was making $500 a month, just for sake of argument, right? If his copyright ran out after 20 years, he would lose that money to support his daughter.
Not necessarily. Because here's the thing. In a story like that, he writes a book about his daughter and her struggles.
No, it's not about her. He just wrote a supernatural book,
okay, so he wrote like a sci-fi fantasy type book.
Yeah.
Okay, so if he does that, and he has this thing where he says, "Hey, buy my book. It helps support my developmentally disabled child, and it helps in this particular area. People are suckers for emotions. Not me, but other people are suckers for emotion, and they will support that person in that thing. But also, does it not push him to write another book, make more products?
Well, in his case,
keep going.
it didn't. But
Okay, that's what I'm saying. Is that he has no competition. You're like, okay, well, if I write this and somebody else can just take my characters and write something else, then I have to fight with it.
If there was no copyright, and let's say I was an evil sociopath, right?
Don't be acting like you aren't an evil sociopath, good sir. Come on.
What's to stop me from taking his book, if there's no copyright, putting my name on it, changing 10 words, and
well, I think
posting it.
Plagiarism would still run to that to some extent.
Plagiarism there's no plagiarism economically. Plagiarism is an academic thing.
Well, I mean, you could put that in the rules as well, the law.
Well, so now we have a more complicated law than the existing one.
What I'm saying is that I can't just go take something, but I can utilize aspects of the IP. Like, okay, Rings of Power takes aspects of Tolkien's work, but it doesn't by any means make it equal to it in any shape or form.
Can you plagiarize the Declaration of Independence?
Like to sell?
Plagiarize means to take something someone else wrote or whatever and put it in your own work without properly attributing it.
If I take it as a 1-for-1 and I don't change anything and I sell like a picture of it, that should be fine. If I claim it's mine, like I am the author of said thing, that would be fraudulent.
It wouldn't be.
It would be, because I did not, in fact, make it. That's fraudulent. Saying that I did something I didn't do is fraudulent.
Again, it's an open. The Declaration of Independence is in
the Declaration of the Declaration of Independence itself. Sure, I could take it and then modify it however I want to and say this is in my world of biggly jugula. Boom, this is the rules that they use in their civilization in my book. I could do that, sure. I could even potentially take it 1-for-1 and put it in there and say in a non-existent world, in a fictitious world, they came up with the exact same thing because they had the exact same thought process, which a lot of people would argue is logically possible. But if I was to say, no, I actually made this document, and I obviously clearly was not alive when it was made, it's a lie. It's a fraudulent endeavor to say I made this. I could say I made a copy of it, and you can buy the copy because you can technically do that. When I bought this house, they had I think it was either the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence, something like that, was just on a poster somewhere. Somebody has made a copy of that and sold it. Sure. But that's not the point. The point is that I am not claiming to be an author of said thing. So if I'm going to make...
Even if you did, I'm telling you, there is no criminal or civil penalty that could be applied to you.
Yet. That's why you add one in when you make the adjustments.
So you want to make more complicated laws.
Well, I don't like vague laws. Vague laws make criminals of us all.
No, they don't.
Yeah, they do. You break probably 20 laws a day just by existing because there's laws that are so vague.
That's a layperson's myth.
No, it's quite literally. Cops have told me this. They just don't care about the little detailed ones. It's whatever they choose to actually invoke them and put them into play. People break them all the time. It's just some are more important than others. If they went after every single thing, they could never go after severe crimes. That's why they do
again.
I'm in favor of less laws, but I want less laws that cover things explicitly.
To lawyers who said that what you said is nonsense.
I can't afford to talk to lawyers, so.
Well, I have been related to lawyers, so
I have never been cursed like that. So,
anyway, point is, if you, let's say you published, the Declaration of Open Independence, right? And you sold it for $10 a copy, okay?
Sure. And you said, I don't know if anybody sells the Declaration.
I am the author of the Declaration of Open Independence just because they put the word "open" in it, right?
Okay.
There's nothing they can do legally to stop you.
Okay, but I could also just take that and then do the Declaration of Unopened Independence, and then boom.
Again, because it's in the public domain, i.e. open source, there's no criminal or civil penalty that could be applied once something goes open source. Okay,
Yeah, I'm not
right?
saying that it can't, like, you can't do that in open source. I'm saying that you would reduce the point and the range in which the copyright and trademark hold to and what
But
it
again, okay,
reaches
so let's
out to.
circle back. Let's circle back to the argument. Okay, the copyright protection is not for people like the Tolkien estate. Because they were millionaires since like the 70s, basically, right after his death. Um, the copyright is for the blue collar guy who comes up with maybe one song or one book or whatever. Okay, the copyright is comes up for like one song or one book or one PowerPoint, but whatever it is, and make some money on it. Maybe they make a like a. Oh, here's a good example. you know Star Trek Discovery. You heard of that show, right? Star Trek Discovery.
What a I know about it.
Yeah. So early in Discovery, there was a big lawsuit between this dude who invented some concepts, right? And they stole them for the show. And he kind of lost most of the lawsuit because he basically put his concept into the public domain unintentionally. So, in other words, so instead of, remember we said before, you have to not only protect your copyright, but actually use it, right? He created this concept of some sort of something with the time travel used in Discovery. I don't remember the whole broad point of it, but he created the concept for these things, right? And but never did anything with it. So when Discovery basically just started using them, he sued over. But they said, "Look, buddy, you may have wrote this in a paper 20 years ago about these things and made them up as fiction or whatever, but you never used your copyright. And it's 20 years later. You can't just go and claim it now. You never filed for the copyright back then. You never tried to protect it before when all the other people used it for free. You know, you never tried to commercialize it. So we're not going to, we're not, you know, in other words, for 20 years, it was an open source concept basically. He didn't enforce it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, Discovery used it, was making money. So now you want to enforce copyright. So they said, no, you can't. Okay. Because you did not follow the full, both the parts of the copyright.
Yeah.
And so he lost his protection because and he was a small guy because he didn't actively try to even mildly commercialize, saying, if he had just put up a thing saying, if you use my idea and are willing to donate $1, if he had just done that, he would have won the lawsuit against Discovery. He never did that, you know.
Yeah, well,
Um,
I'm just, like, I know that, like, if you say something to a company like Nintendo that you're utilizing something that you shouldn't be, or I
yeah,
guess a better one would be like artists, because I've heard this one more recently where there are former Marvel and DC comics like artists and stuff, and they'll go to cons and they'll have pre-drawn stuff that they can print out and they can sign and sell to people for, however much money.
yeah,
If they do it for like 100 copies, they usually ignore it. But if you're doing it like as a constant, thousands upon thousands upon thousands, Marvel and DC have to step in. If you tell them about it, they have to step in and fight it, because that's part of
yeah.
the protection stuff. I get that kind of stuff. I don't, again,
But I'm not
necessarily.
talking about Marvel or DC. They're
Oh, no,
big companies.
I know.
Um,
I'm talking just like in terms of how a company has to respond, or a
yeah.
creator has to respond
Okay. Okay.
to something to protect their copyright.
Our dispute over is how long should copyright be, and you don't like the idea that it's
I think it should
so.
be shorter than it is now. I
Okay.
also think it should be reduced on what it covers, because outside of profit, if people are buying, you can't say, oh, somebody else making a similar but yet like a fan, like, let's say Lord of the Rings fan film or something. You can't say, well, that fan film is, making me lose money. It's like, well, did you make a film? Well, yes. Did it make money? Maybe I lost money. Okay, did that mean you made it well, or did you made it poorly? Like, I would argue that the War of the Rohirrim was just, I need to keep my hands on the IP. It wasn't an actual attempt to do anything. But if I go out and say, I'm going to go hire a Japanese studio for both the artwork as well as the animation, like basically do what you would do for a normal anime in Japan, and I said, I want to hire them and have them
Okay.
make a Lord of the Rings version that's a fan thing. Like, I'm doing it, but I will not sell it to make profit, but I will make it. There's nothing that I can do that can hurt them except their pride
Okay.
because they're terrible at what
Oh,
they
let's
do
use
and they're
Lord of the
arguing
Rings.
about me.
Let's use Lord of the Rings. If copyright only been like 20 years or so, like you want, Lord of the Rings might never have been written.
Well, no, it would have been based upon individual works.
No, what happened is after 20 years of not getting a sequel to The Hobbit, the company would have paid someone else to write the sequel.
But it wouldn't have been Tolkien, so you wouldn't have gotten nearly as quality. And when Tolkien put his out, they would have gone for Tolkien, hands down.
But Tolkien only produced it because the company kept
Yeah,
nagging
but
him.
what I'm saying is like, okay, if he writes The Hobbit, right? So Tolkien
Yeah.
writes The Hobbit. They're like, oh, we want another one, another one. And he's like, I'm still working on it. And they're like, okay, we'll have somebody else do it. It's gonna have somebody else's name on it. Nobody's gonna care because people
But
care
Tolkien
because it's
only
Tolkien.
worked on the Lord of the Rings because the company kept nagging him over it.
Sure,
Okay,
and that's
what he was actually
fine.
working on was the Silmarillion.
Sure, and guess what? He could have done both, whatever the case might be. What I'm saying is
If
that you
after 20 years,
you can't be like The Hobbit Part 2 and then have Jerry
If after-
Smith as the
if after
author. No
20
one's going to
years-
care.
Unwin, I think it's the company was Unwin. If after 20 years, Unwin was like Irwin or something like that.
Yeah, Alan
It was
Unwin.
like, well,
yeah.
now the copyright's in the public domain. We're going to pay Bob Smith to write the sequel to The Hobbit.
Again,
Tolkien-
you can, but if Tolkien decides I'm going to make the actual sequel of it, people are going to buy it because it's going to have Tolkien's name on
But
it.
his incentive to make the sequel wasn't the profit. He didn't care about that.
Yeah, but it was popularity. It was people like whatever he had as a personal
In his
thing.
lifetime, his works were not very popular. It was it was.
I don't know
It was
about
near the
that.
end of his life. It was near the end of his lifetime, in the mid to late 60s, when he started to make serious money off of it. When it became popular.
Well, maybe
right?
serious money, sure, but I think they were still popular. They were popular enough for them to keep telling him to make them.
When Lord of the Rings was published, finally, it began to have growing popularity through the late 50s into the 60s. But it was only, like, I want to say 65 or so, which was very near the end of his life.
Also keep in mind that if he was writing these as a financial purpose, like himself, to like help pay for his kids or whatever the case might be, having a shorter copyright would encourage him to make more. By definition, because he'll make more money if he makes more.
He does not care one whit about the money.
Then there's no reason for him to ever make another one. He just did it because he was peer pressured into it by a publisher, which in that case would have happened anyway.
His incentive to write Lord of the Rings, not leaving aside the pressure increased, like, because basically other people wanted more of the story.
Well, sure. I mean, a good author has people who are fans that read their books and then want more.
To create that, but he wanted to finish the Silmarillion first.
Sure,
okay?
I get that. And in that world, maybe he would have finished the Silmarillion first. It might have been a hard read for a lot of people.
He never would have finished it because he died in 73 before he could finish Silmarillion.
No, I'm saying if he hadn't done Lord of the Rings instead. That's what I'm saying. If he had just worked on explicitly that. But at some point, he could have had Christopher help him put everything together and organize
Christopher
it.
Did help him. Christopher did.
Well, I meant he could have done it earlier, is what I'm saying. But yeah.
Christopher helped him. Christopher helped him since the beginning, since he was a little kid. But let's get sidetracked. The point is, if after 20 years, Unwin or Irwin, whatever I can't remember, it's Unwin or Irwin.
It's Unwin.
Yeah, was like, okay, wait a minute, this Tolkien guy, he hasn't given us a sequel yet, and we think there's a little money made here, and
sure.
It's in the public domain now, so we're just gonna take The Hobbit, which is in the public domain, hire one of our staff writers, who say write a sequel to this book based on that world,
sure,
and we're gonna call the King of the Rings or whatever.
Okay.
And
it would probably fail.
It might have. The point is, Tolkien would have said, "Okay, you got that. I'm out of this. I'll keep working on the Silmarillion."
Sure.
Because he himself never cared about making money off this product. I mean, Tolkien was financially secure once he got his Oxford professorship and all that.
And he got his tenure. I know. I understand this. What I'm saying is that just because somebody else goes out and makes another one, because the publisher's not impatient about, I gotta make all the money, blah, 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 because they, obviously don't have any other authors that are any good. But if they're pushing it so hard, and he doesn't care about the money or whatever the case might be, and they have some other schmuck make it, it doesn't mean it's going to sell. It doesn't have Tolkien's name on it. It doesn't
And that's
have him.
exactly my point. It would have been it would have been called the sequel to J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit. That's what it would have been
but
called.
An intelligent publisher, which I don't know if Unwin was, but maybe they were, maybe they weren't. An intelligent, because again, if this is the way the economy functions, they have to take in all the considerations. If it's something that's just easily replaceable, you can't easily replace a success. You have to keep that success.
Tolkien did not have Tolkien outside of academia and a limited area. Tolkien's name is not what sold Lord of the Rings. Okay, it was other writers reading Lord of the Rings and saying this is serious shit and spreading the word about it.
Yeah,
and then they spread the word to America.
Yeah,
and America.
It was a freaking wildfire over here.
Well, America, the United States, with the Tolkien Society formed, by the way, that's what spread Lord of the Rings. Okay,
Rip
it was
Tolkien Society, by the way.
It was basically, well, yeah, but it was basically the fantasy authors saying, "Wait, this is a great British book," getting into America, and it popularized here massively. Big chunk of money starts going back over the publishers, and then it began, and then the rest of the world knows before Britain even did, right?
Yeah, but that's not my point. My point is that if the feel of how the economy works based off of the trademarks and copyright system had been altered to like a 20 year or something, if that's the case, that means the publishers are going to have to adjust accordingly to that culture of that time, because they would have already been coming into it with that understanding that this is only going to last for a certain amount of time. We need to do what we got to do what we got to do.
And my point is, we never would have gotten Lord of the Rings.
Well, we might not have, which would have sucked. But at the same time, you could potentially create tons of other IPs and things based off of those stories. You could have.
You told me personally, this is a personal, that I could either, if the price for having Lord of the Rings was 25% of the world's books being deleted, I would be happy with that.
Well, if you got a pick from them, but what if they were good books? What if Wheel of Time never got to be printed?
I would take Lord of the Rings, Wheel of Time in a heartbeat.
Well, sure. I mean, obviously, Tolkien is a superior author and has a superior world because it's detailed languages and all that fun jazz. But Jordan's still good. But my point is that if you get a pick, you say pick the current modern day, take 25% of them and chuck them, you wouldn't lose much because there's not much value in them. But if you take
what would be lost in that 25%, there are a lot of people who publish books like one book and they're gaining income and it's helping their family out or whatever. And they would see, that's the point of copyright law. This is what I'm trying to get back to you. It's not about Lord of the Rings and video game copyrights. It's about the little guy putting their one product out and getting a small amount of money and not having it stolen by large corporations.
Sure, but my point is that if you have this person making all this money, right? They bring in all this money. If their goal is to make it a business, to make it an income, because I don't think that was Tolkien's drive, obviously, because he had money.
Well, again, we're circling back to what my point is, right?
Hold on. But what I'm saying is that if these people are making something in hopes to bring in a trickle of an income or a flood of an income, whatever the case might be, when they have success, it's supposed to drive them to make something else. Because
no, it's not.
If it's a business plan, yes. Because you're not going to make money off of something that everybody else can make.
The majority of people who create stuff and therefore subject to copyright aren't doing it for business reasons. They're doing it for artistic reasons.
Well, sure. But then it doesn't matter either way. They're doing it for artistic reasons. No one can take their artistic reason. But it doesn't mean that they're bound.
They can steal under your rule, they can steal their product for 20 years.
They can't steal the product. They can steal aspects of the product.
Once something's in the public domain, you can steal the entire thing.
It's like saying... Again, that's because that's how it's currently set. It doesn't have to be currently set that way. That's my point. It doesn't have to be. You're imposing that upon it. I don't agree with that. I'm saying if you make an adjustment to something in legal standards, you don't just leave the prior thing and then adjust one little thing. You adjust the entire work.
So you want it so the government has control over this stuff?
No. The government is only supposed to protect things within the limitations of it. I'm saying the limitations of it are what need to be adjusted. So if for example, Sonic movie is getting made and it looks horrific. Let's say they put it out that way. and it was terrible and it flops. But then I'm like, you know what? I've got a couple $100 million laying around. I really don't, unless somebody wants to donate. But I have $100 million that I can throw at this thing. And I'm like, I'm going to make an actual Sonic thing. I can use the character of Sonic, but I can't make an exact Sonic replica of the cartoons that came out. I can't make the exact crappy Sonic that they made and that whole storyline. But I can make a storyline. I can make up a story and have the character of Sonic in it. And then if mine does really, really, really well, I will benefit from it for the 20-year period because I made something of it. And at that particular aspect,
not in the 20-year period. After the 20-year period.
No. I'm saying after the 20-year period of the original, I would make something.
So,
and then
again, Sonic is a multi-billion-dollar product. The vast majority of copyrightable things are not multi-billion-dollar products.
No. I'm just saying in terms of how to utilize it. I'm saying I can use a character of something. If I wanted to use Frodo 20 years after he's been produced,
a multi-billion-dollar product. You're making a law.
The volume of how much money it makes is irrelevant to the thing itself.
It is not.
It is.
The law is designed to protect the income of people who don't have multi-billion-dollar products.
But it doesn't, because they don't make that much money off of it.
So under your
because you don't like if that was the case, you could say anything under $1 million is protected indefinitely. Because you're never making $1 million if you're making $20-$30 a month off of your book. Just not happening. That's reality.
So you want a more complicated law.
If you are explicit in what the law covers and what it doesn't cover, it prevents loopholes by definition.
No, it doesn't. It does not. It is.
When you make vague, you can make plenty of loopholes because it doesn't imply to this because
you can't. The language, the English language itself has loopholes in sentence structure. As long as you have that, you have loopholes in the law.
Then you make it explicit to prevent those loopholes.
You can't. You can't in English. You just can't.
Well, I mean, in a language that you can literally just go to the dictionary and change whatever word you want.
Then you have a 700-page bill with 1 million words in it. Only lawyers can read.
7 million? Is that what you said?
I said a 700-page legal document.
700-page. Okay, I was like 7 million. Well, that's
which, excessive. By the way, you complained about two sessions ago that these laws are too complicated for that Congress passes. There are hundreds of pages, no one ever reads them. Well, to do what you want to do, that's how big a law you would need.
I don't know if that's a fact. I can take your word for it. You have to itemize
every specific possible circumstance to eliminate every loophole.
Not if it deals with an explicit, detailed thing. A person makes a product. That product is covered for 20 years. And here's the protections. Any product.
What does any mean?
A product is created. It's covered for 20 years.
What does a product mean and what does created mean?
Okay, now you're being pedantic.
In the law, if you go read laws on this stuff, everything in these words is defined.
If any business produces something, it is a product by definition.
Okay, that sentence you just read, in a law, every single word has to have a definition printed in the law.
They have definitions. It's called the dictionary.
No, it's not. That's not a law. Dictionary is not a law.
I'm not saying a dictionary is a law. I'm saying every word that has to have a definition, guess what? That definition is already in existence in the English language.
Because when you go to court, the dictionary cannot be submitted as evidence. Oh, the primary source.
Nobody goes to court using a dictionary as evidence. That's not what I was saying at all.
Okay, when you go to court, when you sue someone over something, and let's say there's a law involved, the only acceptable definition for the words in the law are the law itself or laws it's subject to.
And how do they get their definitions?
The topmost definition are the laws it's under.
No. I'm saying the laws that were made, where do they get those definitions from?
It doesn't matter.
It does matter, because how do they get those words and how do they mean what they mean? How is it not completely 100 million% vague?
The legally acceptable meaning is what's in the law, is not what's in the dictionary.
So if the law says don't kill somebody, I can say, well, I can, or say don't murder somebody. Don't murder somebody. I'll say, well, it wasn't technically murder because by definition over here, that's new word we made, it's not murder, and therefore this law doesn't apply to me.
All that stuff is argued all the
there's
time
no
in the
freaking
courts.
way. We know clearly what murder is. It's the ending of a life of an innocent person due to outside law behavior, legal law behavior.
Well, outside what law behavior? What?
Like if they are found of whether it be a death penalty or
cite the specific laws you are referring to.
Dude, I don't memorize the laws, and I doubt you do either.
I know that's the point I'm making to you.
No. You don't go to law and say, okay, cite every single law that ever existed to me. Otherwise, you can't talk about laws. Is a BS claim, good sir. There's nowhere that is going to be anything remotely. You never finish a court case.
Court for anything, you have to do that.
No. You have to know what's relevant to what you're talking about. That's why we have legal advice from legal professionals.
When you go into a court, you have to cite every single relative law. Has to be in your documentation.
Was the person who was murdered aggressively doing anything towards anyone else? No. Okay. He's an innocent.
You don't know.
There are things that if you can't define it this way, it would take 20 years for every single court case, and we would never push anything through.
Why do you think they take so long?
Because they're lazy and they have very vague things as opposed to very explicit.
There are tons of pretrial hearings you have to go through to get to cite specific evidences and cases and whatever.
Which is them making it more complicated because they're not being explicit. They're being vague.
And that's why we have freedom. That's why we have freedom. That's why we don't get false convictions.
You can't get false convicted of something if you have explicit and you don't meet that criteria. That's why explicit's better than vague.
You're showing a lack of knowledge of how the legal process works.
No, I'm showing that it's a broken system. That's a different story. But
it's not broken. In your opinion, it's broken, but it actually works quite well.
That's your opinion.
The vast majority of people who are convicted of crime are actually criminals who actually did it.
The vast majority could be how much?
Like 98, 99%.
That's not that. How'd you get to that definition of vast majority? Because that could easily be 60%.
Stats you can look up. What are the percentage of convictions that are
stats
overturned?
are things that you can't screw up, but they are even based off of things. They can't be based off of vagueness. They have to be based off of specifics.
They're based on criminal convictions. Literally, less than less than 1 or 2% of criminal convictions are overturned for the person being innocent.
And there's also the amount of people who get away free because it wasn't detailed enough in how the law was presented.
Almost anyone who goes to court for a crime is convicted.
I mean, they'll convict anybody for any reason virtually because there's so much vagueness. That's the problem.
That's not vagueness. The law is very, very specific. That's why lawyers are very, very specific.
If it's very, very specific, and I was saying we should be very, very specific, it's somehow bad. I don't understand this. Which one is it?
I'll give you an example, okay?
Give me an example, then we'll get back to the topic of stop killing games because we're way off topic.
The law, a very specific example. Congress passed a law in the 70s about it being a felony to disrupt the administrative function of Congress. And what
does that even mean?
I'll get there.
That's vague.
What they're referring to was when the Weather Underground basically blew up the congressional building. Okay.
When what did?
The Weather Underground. They were a left-wing terrorist group.
Oh, okay.
They blew up part of Congress.
Okay. I mean, that's an aggressive act. That's pretty covered already.
50 years later, the Biden administration on the January 6th prosecutions started using that law to prosecute thousands of people, many of whom didn't even go to the January 6th day. The Supreme Court about last year said, no, that law cannot be applied to circumstance, and threw out thousands of convictions.
Sure. Good. That has nothing to do with what I said.
Because the law, they looked at the law, they looked at what that law came under, and said under what that law is subject to, it doesn't apply to the January 6th event.
Sure.
They used legal, and the legal decision to do that by the Supreme Court was hundreds of pages.
Yeah, but they wouldn't even need that law to begin with because somebody.
Yes, you did.
Somebody threatening someone's life with death is an act of aggression, and aggression is already covered.
But it's not. Blowing up Congress is not. Blowing up Congress to stop congressional function was not illegal at the time.
Attempted murder on somebody.
No, the building was empty.
Okay, destroying somebody else's property. Okay.
They couldn't actually prosecute them until they made that law.
Why can't you prosecute somebody for destroying property that is not theirs? That's already there.
Because the property, because I was in Washington, D.C.
It doesn't matter.
Yes, it does matter because the laws governing property
No,
destruction were in Maryland and were not in Washington D.C. They were in Maryland and Delaware.
it doesn't matter.
It does matter.
Do the people who set the bomb to blow up the building own the building? The answer is no.
Do the people
That it's destruction of someone else's property, and thus you can
no one
convict
owns
them.
Congress. You understand that? No one
No,
owns Congress.
Oh my gosh! It doesn't matter who owns Congress.
Well, guess what?
It only
When they
applies
tried,
to
when
do
they tried to
you own
prosecute them
something.
before that law. The judges said no, you can't prosecute them.
Because the judge is a moron.
So
Again,
people who disagree with you are a moron. That's basically what you're saying is
no,
you're making an attack on the system.
don't straw man me. Don't straw man me.
You just did it.
No, I'm saying that person is a moron because saying that destroying
It wasn't just one
property.
person.
Okay, it doesn't matter who owns the building as long as it's not you. It's destruction of private property or property in general.
That's not the way the law works.
If I take something from your house, you can't be like, well, it's not theft because that's not the way it works.
That. The law defines that as burglary.
But that's not what the judge agrees with because the judge doesn't agree with it, and therefore, poof, it's all of a sudden not the way it's supposed to.
The judge would agree with it because burglary exists an existing law that passed.
So destroying private property or property that is not yours is a property.
Congress is not private property.
Okay, I said property that is not yours. Destroying something that is not yours is destruction of property, and whatever entity owns said property or doesn't own said property is irrelevant to the fact that you destroyed something that isn't yours and therefore are held liable for the damages of those things.
It was theirs.
So they own the building.
Everyone owns Congress.
That's not how that works.
It's public property. The entire public.
I own the government,
property.
therefore I own all the taxes go to my bank account.
Well, if you can get Congress to pass that, that's possible.
No, that's not how that works. That's not how that works.
It is how that works.
No, the only thing you own is the things you have paid for via some form of fund, or you have physically created yourself.
That's not how ownership works. Ownership doesn't work by money. Ownership works by ownership.
Define ownership.
The government recognizes that you have title to property.
Okay, so who owns the United States property that is not owned by private citizens?
The people of the United States.
No, they don't.
Yes, that is the law.
Because then going on those premises for January 6th or anything else would never have even begin to be a problem in any shape or form because we already own the territory. We can just walk in whenever we want.
They weren't charged. They were not charged of being on the property.
Can you walk into a courthouse, which is government-based owned, with a firearm? No, they will stop you. You can't just say, well, I own this building and continue to walk in. You cannot do that. You don't have the right to do that. They will not let you do that.
Well, no, you have
the right. That's just not
going
to happen.
But again,
you don't have ownership at all of that building. The capital of whatever state you live in, you do not have ownership of that building.
Yes, you do.
You do not. Because when you go there, they will tell you off if you're not supposed to be there.
Where in the Constitution does it say you have the right to take your firearm into a courthouse?
The Second Amendment.
Nope, doesn't say it anywhere in it at all.
It says the government gotta stay off your guns. That's what it says.
That's not what it says at all.
It was literally written to limit the government, not to limit us.
It was literally, yes, but again, it does not say that you can carry your gun anywhere. Owning your gun.
It doesn't have to say the exact words for it not to exist. That's not how that works.
Here's how that works.
It's called an umbrella term.
And you know what you get when you don't follow.
Can the government regulate firearms? No. End of story.
Yes, the government regulates firearms all the time.
They're not supposed. That's the whole. Anyway, enough of the politics. Enough of the politics. We're gonna be here for 5 hours, and I've got time limits myself. Back to stop killing games. And yes, this is more interesting than probably this particular topic, but this is an important topic. As I will probably disagree with you, and you will probably agree with the person we are about to watch. Let's just go ahead and watch their.
Oh, there's a video too?
Yeah, I have videos, yes. They're not terribly long, thankfully, but we know how to make short videos very long. So we'll just jump to this in this regard. So this is Pirate Nation, and he sometimes posts things on Twitter I like, and other times he says really dumb things, and we'll see which one he says here.
Hi, My name is Jason Thorhall,
Let me know
also
if you
known
can
as
hear that or not.
PirateSoftware Online. I've been in the gaming
Good.
industry for about
Okay.
20 years. I used to work at Blizzard Entertainment, then Amazon Game Studios, and now I
I
own
don't hear
my
anything
own
yet.
studio.
You don't hear anything?
Nope. Do you have that tab checked for audio?
Range. Let me do some wikis.
If the tab is in StreamYard, there's going to be a little checkbox that says like play audio.
I mean, it is. It's just the sharing tab. I'm sharing it. It's not sharing. Okay, hold on.
Try again.
Hold on. This is gonna get funky monkey.
Chunky monkey.
Hmm.
Yeah, I can't eat ice cream. I have a craving for it.
1 second. All right. I think it will work now. So now we'll try this again.
Once more
Hi,
onto the store.
my name is Jason Thorhall,
Is that too
also known
loud?
as PirateSoftware Online. I've been in the gaming industry for about 20 years.
Oh,
I
that was
used to work at
perfect. Pause
Blizzard
it. Pause it.
Entertainment, then
I said once more onto the storm, and he said my name is Jason Thorhall, Thor, the God of Thunder. You know,
Oh my god.
that's perfect.
All right. Is that too loud? Does that work?
Actually, probably put it a little louder.
Because it's really loud in my ears.
Oh no, the protector. I can deal with it by moving the phone by my ear or whatever. But protect yourself.
Amazon Game Studios, and now I own my own studio, Pirate Software, by the same name, which is an indie studio, and I've been here for about 8 years now. I also run a massive community. We've got about 180,000 people in Discord, and most of what I do is try to teach other people how to make games, teach them that they can.
I'd like to point out that none of this is relevant to the topic, and I don't think it matters if you have these qualifications or not. Your point is either logical or illogical.
Well, I think what he's doing.
He's trying to build. He's trying to build some credibility for himself. Like he knows what he's talking about.
Well,
But
he's trying to
there's
say he has experience in the field. I think is what he's saying.
sure,
Yeah.
but for every person like him that says this, there's another person that says something else. Like that, I'm credible because X, Y, and Z. Okay,
There's a phrase which you might not be familiar with called "talking out your ass." And what that means is,
I am
in the
familiar with
olden
the
days,
phrase. Thank you. I'm not that sheltered.
well, what that means is someone who talks about something but has no experience in it. Like someone talks about plumbing but have never actually plumbed anything in their entire life. You know.
I mean,
So
I have plumbed things in my life, but that does not make me an expert in any shape or form.
no, but you
I'm
can
still pretty ignorant on
That
that.
means you can talk about some basic plumbing stuff because you at least.
I don't know the technical terms. Like technical terms, and I have a hard relationship, and I didn't mean that in the way.
But that's not the point I'm making. The point I'm making is because there's some experience in the field. If you say, "Hey, Matt, to fix your toilet bowl, you have to call a plumber or you have to use a plunger this way, or whatever." I say, "Okay, he probably did that himself. You know, I'll do it. Take his advice."
Sure.
This guy's trying to establish the same thing. I think I don't know yet because I don't know his comments.
Yeah.
He's saying, I'm in this field. I've seen all this stuff. I'm going to give my opinion and advice, and then I can say, okay, his principle is reasonable, and he's not talking out of his ass. So maybe I'll take his advice.
I'd rather care about whether he's logical or not and consistent.
Well, you gotta have both. You gotta have both. I think. Like,
not necessarily.
I'm too far away from high school to remember all this, but so when you form an opinion, right? Okay, because everything we do is subjective.
I only form facts, good sir.
No, just bear with me, okay?
Make it short.
As an individual, we cannot be objective. We cannot do objective stuff. We can only judge objective by external standards. So
no. Objectivity is external standards. You can
no,
say something is or is not objective because it's based upon those external standards.
Okay, let me give you a concrete example, right? I can perform a scientific experiment, right?
No, you can't.
Well, I can. Yes,
I'm just kidding.
I can.
I'm just kidding. You're like, what?
I can perform a scientific experiment that verifies Einstein's theory of relativity, right? But my experiment is subject to my experience. However, if my experiment,
data is data. It's if you put the wrong data in, you get the wrong data out. That's how that works.
What if while I was recording data, I was having an aneurysm?
Was all the information you put in correct?
What if 98% was correct?
Then it's not inaccurate.
But if I'm the only person who verified the experiment, how will we know if Einstein was correct or not?
We don't know unless you compare data notes.
That
Or you
again,
repeat it again and 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 again.
that is the object. That's how you
But
establish
the
objectivity.
scientific method itself would be objective. The data you put in and
The
got out is not
validation-
necessarily
The
objective.
validation of the scientific experimentation is comparing it to everyone else. That's where
Well,
the objective
it's comparing
comes
it
from.
to a standard outside of ourselves. Yes.
Correct. So you yourself, your experience,
So
subject
the
to your
scientific
experiences.
method objectively works for everyone equally because the method is input data, get data out.
No. The scientific method, it does not work for everyone equally.
So if you put in data and I put in data in my own, we
Because not
both get
everyone
data
does
out.
everything. Not everyone does everything correctly.
No,
Nor
okay,
did-
no. You're misunderstanding. You're misunderstanding what I'm saying. I'm not saying that everyone does the scientific method the correct way, or
Okay,
that we all
I'm
do
not-
it equally. I'm saying
I'm not-
explicitly
I'm not arguing with
the
you.
scientific method of putting in information and getting out information works equally for everyone.
I'm not arguing with you. I'm telling you from epistemology, the validation of knowledge. It's part of the process. Okay?
I'm not talking about the validation of knowledge. I'm talking about the objectivity of the scientific method. The scientific method will always be input
again.
data and get out data. That input and output is the scientific method.
No, that's not the scientific method. The scientific method is discover a problem, form a hypothesis, gather data, form a theory, test a theory. That's the scientific method. Okay,
That's the input of data, and that is the output of data.
it's not the input of data. You have to formulate an algorithm.
You do
to
all
analyze
this
the data.
stuff. The algorithm is not the scientific method. The
It
method
is
is
part. Yes, yes, it is part of the
no, because
method.
the algorithm can be different. It can be different things.
Correct. That is correct. That is why you have to externally validate the objectivity.
No, I'm saying the scientific method is you form a hypothesis, I form a hypothesis. You do an algorithm, I do an algorithm. These don't have to be the same things.
Correct. And if
The
they lead to the
whole
same,
process is called the scientific method. But every scientific method doesn't have to have each of those individual steps exactly. They can be modified
yes,
or whatever.
it does.
No. Because
Yes,
you
it
don't
does.
need an algorithm in every detail of everything.
Yes, you do.
You need to put in data under the guise like 1 + 1 = 2 is a scientific method. You take
No, it's
1
not.
and a 1, you
Yeah,
input them
How does it? How
through
does
the
that happen?
numeric system, and out
You
comes
mean-
the answer.
You mean
But
the system, the algorithms of numerology that have been known by mathematicians over centuries? Do we know those
Developer discovered.
developed?
I would argue they're discovered, but that's a different story.
Well, you get irrelevant. 1 + 1 = 2 in base numerology as defined, and to make 1 + 2 into a computer, you have to program a chip according to those algorithms.
Sure, you can create, and I'm not saying you can't create algorithms. I'm saying the method itself inherently does not require an algorithm.
You cannot analyze data without an algorithm.
You technically can. I'm not. You don't have to do all of this in a lab. You do realize this, right?
Your brain forms algorithms to analyze data.
Sure, that's all purely subconscious. You're not sitting there spewing out algorithms out of your mouth.
But you still do it.
You're sure you do. I do algebra every single day of my life, and I
Good. Now,
don't
look,
understand it from the
you're right on my
school
point.
aspect. But
Okay?
what I'm saying is,
You're right on
from
the
a
point I'm trying
logical,
to get you
if
to.
I go say how many trees do I have to cut down to make my house, I don't necessarily have to build a massive quantum mechanical type of algorithm. I just have to say, okay, I have this much length, this much length, and this much length, and this much length.
So you have an algorithm. You have an algorithm.
You have a system of basic knowledge, yes.
Again, you have an algorithm.
Sure. Just like I have the same algorithm
Sure.
how to poop.
Back to the point I'm making, which you keep trying to skip away from. To properly analyze his opinion, you not only need his objective logical of process, you need to have a sense of him himself. You need both. So in other words, do we know his brain is working correctly when he formed this opinion? That's what his experience. So by knowing some of his experience, you can make a judgment on what he's presenting.
I don't care what he presents. I care what he outputs. If he can come to the logical conclusion and it's accurate because we compare it with everybody else's inputs and outputs, that's what tells me it's accurate
So you
or
did
not.
just what I said, which is you take his subjective opinion and compare it to
No.
other people.
The data output is subjective. The method in which he does it is not.
It is subjective because he did it. It's subject to his
No,
perceptions.
he's told me that he is this person of some import to this particular industry in some shape or form, whether it may be high or low. It's irrelevant.
So that tells us that his brain has
That tells
structures.
you nothing, because there are plenty of people in industries that require smart people that are actually dumb people. That's not a
Which,
measurement.
again,
There
not
are
relevant to him.
professors that are idiots. It's just they've
None
managed
of-
to pass their
None of that is
classes.
relevant to forming a judgment about him.
I'm not saying it's about him specifically. You're not understanding what I'm saying. I'm saying is, let's say he has all this experience with an industry, and then you have Joe Schmo over here who has no experience with the industry, and they come up with the exact same outcome or result in whatever their opinion is. And I can say, okay, how he comes to this conclusion, which presumably he will tell us in this video, and Joe Schmuck has his, and he comes through his video and he explains himself. If they come to the exact same conclusion, I don't need this guy to come from the industry for it to be correct. It can still be correct.
But you need it to form of whether his opinion is valid.
Could I say that this helps build some credibility? Sure. Do I think that guarantees credibility? No, I don't.
Joe Schmuck who's talking out his ass, just because a clock is right.
No. Hold on. You can know something and not be of the field. Like, you can go on freaking YouTube and learn all the stuff you learn from textbooks, but never have gone to the school, never get the piece of paper that tells anybody I know what I'm doing.
You can be 100% correct.
You could still know and not be talking out your rear end.
You can be 100% correct by accident.
Yes. And that's all I care about, is that particular instance. You are correct. I don't care about any of the other takes. I literally don't.
With the take with Joe Schmuck, who might be right by accident, might have some minute flaw in his thinking that this guy might not. And even though,
and then if somebody wants to take Joe Schmuck's method in which he comes through everything and says, okay, I put the same data in, I found a flaw, but I also rotated it and did something else with it, and I still came up with the same thing, because whether he knew it or not, he missed a step, but his algorithm built and was accounting for that anyway. I don't know.
Let's video.
Point is, just because you say, I have authority because I worked at credibility, blah, blah, blah industry, doesn't mean squat to me. I don't care. But he's doing it because the average person apparently does care, because everything he says from here on out could be absolute BS or it could be absolute truth.
I think he's doing what he's saying, at least so far, that he's sharing his experience with us.
Sure. But his experience is going to be subjective, not the actual data in which he inputs and outputs. Like him commenting on this is purely subjective, because he's commenting on something else that's not his. That's not necessarily the industry.
It's subjective because he's an individual.
What I'm saying is that if he says this will affect the industry in a positive or a negative manner, that's purely on his perspective. It's not going to be based on, yes, this will affect the industry this way. There are other ways it could affect it, is my point.
Let's hit the video.
Make games, show them the tools to do so, and try to do everything without any paywalls or bullshit in the way. It's incredibly important to me that we keep making games and that the next generation has the tools to do so that our medium doesn't die out. And it never will. And that's the whole intention of all of this. So with that in mind, that community brought me this and tried to get me to sign it. And I don't want to.
He can't
Number
sign
one,
it.
I can't because I don't live in Europe. But number two, I wouldn't sign it even if I could. And I'm going to kind of go through this and try to explain the reasoning as to why that would be the case, without all of the internet hate machine that's grown up around it. So let's go into how this works and why this is an issue to me. First things first.
I'm going to point out that this is how he perceives this works, not how it actually works. If you go watch either Mudahar or the original poster of the Stop Killing Games movement, he misstates the actual position several times. So take that as you will.
What is an initiative? So an initiative is actually not law. It is something that you put together so you can put it up in front of representatives and they can start the conversation. The reason why I have a problem with Stop Killing Games is specifically it starts the wrong conversation. If we're trying to kill off the practice of developers putting together a live service game, pitching it as a single player experience, and then taking away support in the future, this ain't it. And the reason why is specifically on
It's because it doesn't exclusively cover that particular topic. But yeah.
this initiative. Under its own description, it says, this initiative calls to require publishers that sell or license video games to consumers in the European Union or related features and assets sold for video games they operate to leave said video games in a functional playable state. Specifically, the initiative seeks to prevent the remote disabling of video games by the publishers before providing reasonable means to continue functioning of said video games without the involvement from the side of the publisher. This isn't always possible in all video games.
Why is it not? Because that's not what he thinks it's saying versus what it's actually saying, I think, are different things. Not just because I watched Manuhar's video and everything, but also because, logically speaking, it's not always possible to fix your game. Yes, you made video games. You can patch literally from the beginning to the end of said thing. You can do a patch at any point in time of that, right? Like, what do you mean it's not always possible? If the company still exists, it's possible.
Well, let's let him say what he thinks first.
And it doesn't call out the specific practice that this is supposedly trying to defeat. It is incredibly vague and will damage all live service games. How would you keep League of Legends
I would not care if it damaged live service games because they're bad, but whatever.
in a functional playable state? You'd have to re-architect the entire game. The game is what is called client-server. So in client-server models, there's a server and there's a client, and all of the math, all of the game, everything happens on the server. The client just displays it. And the reason we want to do it that way is so that you can't teleport around and do 1 billion damage. You don't trust the client. You trust the server. The client just displays what it's told, right?
But you can bypass this by making it a private server in which the rules stay the same. Just enter in on a private server. Like, I do this in Valheim. I can make a private server in which people I invite to my server come to my server and play the game.
To be clear, you can't make a private server. You can spin up an instance of a private server. Someone else already made the private server software.
Yes,
So
that's
you're not writing the code on your own to make a private server.
I know, but that's my point, is that it can be done.
What he's saying is, if I got him right, is that he's not talking about like essentially what you and I would call private pirate servers. He's saying that the company itself would have to be forced to maintain public like non-pirate servers, basically.
I'm saying that, like, for example, League of Legends, which, again, if I wanted to play League of Legends, I install the game. I have all the assets, I have all the files, all the maps, all the champions, everything's on there. But the system would just behave in a single-player mode equivalent, not actual single-player, but single-player mode. I mean, hypothetically, it has AI built in, so you could do single-player mode if you wanted to. But a single-player mode in which everything in the game that I installed would be there, and I could play it in single-player mode or not. And then they would change it to peer-to-peer if it's single-player mode. So in other words, I can connect to somebody else, they can connect to me, and we can have a whole bunch of people, however many you want to have. I think it's, 5v5? You could have all the five people on
Again,
Steam.
I don't disagree with you. That is technically possible.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying, is that saying we do it on the client side for reasons, sure.
I don't think he's talking about that, though. He's talking about the company itself who makes League of Legends being forced to maintain those servers.
But we're not saying you have to maintain those servers. What we're saying is, before it is shut down, you have to make a patch in which those servers become peer-to-peer.
And I can almost guarantee you in Europe, they'll just force the companies to maintain the private servers.
I don't agree with that.
It's the European mentality.
Well, maybe, but that's not necessarily what this initiative is asking for. It's saying it before it leaves, because it specifically says when they are going to, you're trying to prevent the remote disabling of video games before providing reasonable means to continue the functioning of said video games.
The road to hell is paved with good intentions through Europe.
Sure. But what people are asking for, they would be going above and beyond what people are even asking for, which then is not the initiative's problem. They would have been doing that anyway. But that's my point, is that it's like, can I have a cup of water from the town well? Well, now you're getting a bucket of it. And it's like, but I didn't ask for a bucket of it. And you're going to force somebody else to do something
in Europe,
for you.
would be like, okay, we'll give you that bucket of water from town well, but now you got to sign the registry every time you use it.
Again, just because government exists doesn't mean I agree with what it does. And every action the government does take, typically I disagree with. But that's a different story. I'm saying I don't care what the government does, because it's not what this initiative is promoting or asking for, I should say. So if this initiative says this thing, what the government does is irrelevant to what this particular initiative says.
I 100% agree with you that the people who started this Stop the Trade Video Game Initiative are like that. They're not trying. But I also 100% am saying that people are looking at this initiative and saying, how can we exploit this for more power? And
sure, but that's not the fault of the initiative in any shape or form.
Well, it's the responsibility of the initiative to know.
No.
If you do something, you have a responsibility to consider the ramifications of that action.
That's why they word it a particular way. It specifically says without the involvement of the side of the publisher. Okay. So if they go out and do something beyond that,
I am going to state my opinion on this and not starting with you. We've discussed it before. There's no way to put something in laws, especially when you have multiple languages, making it more complicated, that will not give government loopholes to make things worse. That's just my opinion.
Government makes things worse is literally the
government can make things worse in most.
No. It does. It does. Literally, the worst thing you could ever hear is, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help," because they're not there to help. They're there to help them. They're not there to help you. It's always been that way. But again, I'm going to pull away from the politics aspect. But it's not an improvement, because it never goes. Like, if they do too much, they never go backwards. That's how they would help, is reducing. They don't do that.
I personally think the worst thing to hear is oh my God, I forgot all the Black Widow spiders in your house.
No, because I can kill all the Black Widow spiders.
You know.
So if we wanted to re-architect this, we'd have to take all of that server logic, push it back out into the client, and somehow make that playable in a multiplayer only.
He has apparently never heard of peer-to-peer. That's literally all. Yep. Clearly not. He's like, somehow we have to do this. I'm like, what do you mean somehow? Peer-to-peer's existed as long as I can remember.
He's saying that League of Legends will be too complicated for that.
How? You take the actual software that you have to install, and then basically just say the connection is changed.
Everything runs. Okay, did you listen to what he said? In League of Legends, the only thing that runs on your local client is the graphics interface. Everything else happens on the server, right?
Then what are you installing?
You're installing a window to play to the graphics. All you do is running graphics locally.
There's a lot of freaking data in League of Legends.
It all gets. That's why you need a good internet connection for it, right?
But I don't even know if that's an accurate thing, because I
happen to know that's
no. I'm saying it's specifically a live service only game. There is no game, for one. You're not even buying it, but there is nothing there to begin with. The whole point of Stop Destroying Video Games is for games that are there, like Need for Speed 2015.
Well, that may be your opinion, maybe my opinion.
That's what the guy who made this Stop Killing Games initiative said.
Guarantee you that as this thing goes on, there are people in politics and people in corporate and all that who will say, "Hey, we can use this."
Sure. Again, that is completely irrelevant to this. I'm saying he's making a comparison of an apples to an orange, because what the actual initiative is saying, here's an orange, and he's saying, here's an apple, and it's just like the orange. And it's like, but it's not.
He's saying what I'm saying. Inevitably, this Stop Running Film in Europe will be used to do things like he's like.
Again, it's not the initiative's problem. If the government's going to take it however they want to take it anyway, then you can never tell the government, I would like X. Because they'll just take it however they want to take it anyway, and thus you'll just have to deal with whatever problem you have, and by having that problem,
let's keep playing. Let's keep playing.
Video game. That doesn't make sense to me. So this isn't going to work for all games. Why is it calling out all games. And it's really easy to say like, oh,
they're not calling out all games. That's the point. They're calling out games that have a non-live service function in them. You cannot remove them, like The Crew, which has been brought up countless times. And if you don't know that story, look it up. It's all over the place. But they have nothing stating on The Crew, essentially, the short cliff notes, nothing on The Crew states that it will be limited. It's because there's a version of it that does not require online. It can be without online. They just made the game to be entirely online. And then when they took it offline, they're like, the whole single player offline aspect is in the game. All you have to do is say, we're going to patch this so you can play it without it being online. That's literally all they have to do.
Let's let him go because he's going to tell
that'll get worked out down the line. But we're dealing with government here. If we're going to be putting up these types of ideas specifically in front of government, we need to be calling out the right issues, especially if you don't have precedent set. Because now you're going to be setting precedent on something that doesn't make any sense with people that may not understand.
Notice that he says it doesn't make sense, but that's literally from his perspective. It doesn't make sense. I don't know how it makes.
You have to understand his perspective.
No. I'm saying he's like, this doesn't make sense, but I'm like, but it does make sense. So how you aren't getting it is not something I'm responsible for, because you can only be responsible for your own.
From his perspective, how you're not getting is something he's not responsible for.
What? No, I'm saying we read the same document and come to completely different conclusions for this.
And the same statement about him not getting it is not your problem. It's equally true from his side.
No, because I'm not saying it's from my side. I'm saying that means I'm saying if I can understand what the person intended when they wrote the thing, whatever the document was, Stop Killing Games, when they present it, and I could say, I understand how that person is portraying themselves. And he's like, I don't understand how that is. Instead of saying...
He's saying that the person's wrong.
Which he can't, because he already admitted he doesn't understand it. He literally just said, I don't get it.
He just said they're not solving the actual problem.
But he can't even recognize the problem because he doesn't understand what it says.
Because he's saying it's not the actual problem.
Because he doesn't understand what it says.
He just said that the problem they're trying to solve is not the actual problem.
But he doesn't know what they're trying to solve. He just said that.
Because in his opinion, it's nonsense.
Because he doesn't understand it. But instead of...
hold on.
Yeah, instead of asking, how can I understand? Like, bring the guy on and say, can you explain to me what you're trying to do with this, and have the person explain it to understand it? He's saying, I don't understand, therefore it doesn't make sense, rather than, I have the means to try to, like, I don't fully understand it now. Because if I don't understand something, I go to somebody...
Why does he have to do that if he doesn't think they're presenting a solution to the actual problem?
Because then he's misrepresenting the position. He's
just in his video, he's allowed to do that.
I know, but then it's going to kill his credibility. That's a terrible PR move.
Well,
no matter how you shake a stick at it.
In your opinion, it would, and other people's it won't.
No. When somebody, like let's say Nintendo, decides to brick every Switch 2 tomorrow, who's going to go out and buy a Switch 3? Nobody. No.
Millions of people.
Because they're just going to like, I'm just going to get bricked. It's just going to get bricked.
Millions of people, I guarantee you, the bricking issue, the majority of people who play video games don't care.
No. I'm saying, like, if they bricked every single Switch 2, without exception, you can no longer function with it.
You know how I know this to be true? Because Amazon has bricked multiple generations of their Kindles and whatever, and people still buy them.
I have not had any bricked that I have had, but maybe. I don't know. I don't know anything about that.
There are like hundreds of Kindles out there, hundreds of versions. And
hundreds of versions or hundreds of Kindles? Because hundreds of Kindles is very, very different.
There are 100 different versions of the Kindle out there.
If you told me that every single Kindle that they released the newest Kindle, it's super powerful, and millions of people bought it, and they just bricked every single one of those. If they bricked every single one of those, you would not have people buy that Kindle from them ever again.
The last time I read about this, they had bricked more than 12 different versions of Kindle over the years.
12 versions, and they updated the person's Kindle, or like what? I don't have any information to work on.
When certain devices have functionality they don't want you to allow, sometimes they'll change it in software, which is a form of bricking.
Yeah, they'll do an update and then patch it or whatever. Yeah.
And you lose it, and you basically got a brick device because
Or you
can't
find
do
the old
something.
patch and repatch it backwards. Yes.
which they block now.
I mean, there's ways to get around it either way, but yeah.
Well, there are, but the point I'm getting at is people still buy Kindles.
Yes, but I'm
You know,
talking like
there are versions of the iPhone that have been bricked, but they're more popular than every fucking phone there is.
it's also a piece of trash, and people just go for brand knowledge.
The
Like
point
I'm
I'm getting
popular
is-
and I'm relevant because I have an iPhone. Is the dumbest argument you could
The
ever
point
have.
I'm
For
getting at with you is that the majority of people, this bricking thing,
because ironically, I've never heard of anybody saying my Kindle got bricked.
because they don't think of it as being bricked, but that's what it is.
That's because okay, bricking in the current modern sense is it does not have a function. It cannot function. I cannot use it as it was intended to be used. That's the current concept of bricking. So for Switch 2, you
Yes,
can't
correct.
connect to Switch
So-
servers. You can't get your updates. It won't let you play without said updates. Therefore, you cannot use it.
If I
Period.
bought a Kindle, particular model of a Kindle, because it had this
Mhm.
particular function I wanted, and they disable that function
But if they
permanently,
disable that individual function, but the rest of it is still operable, that's different.
which means the device
It's
is
still
effectively
it can still
It's
suck.
not that different. The rest
Yes.
of the device is useless to me because I don't use the rest of it.
Well, that's you choosing not to use the rest of it. I'm saying if the Switch 2 is bricked and you cannot
But
use
those
it. You cannot
people
put a
only buy
cartridge in
those
it.
versions of
You
the Kindle
cannot
to
play it.
do-
You cannot do anything with it. It's literally a paperweight at this point.
Well, you can install Linux on it; it'll be fine.
Sure. Because everybody knows how to do that. But
Well, again, you just said if you can find some other way to use it, it's fine. So
no. I'm saying if they're like, we have there's this particular function of a voice to talk of some shape or form, and they're like, well, something about that has a legal issue, or we just don't want to use it anymore, and then we patch it out. I don't think they should, because terms of services should not be able to be changed from the point of when it's created.
Mhm.
But that's something else I'm not going to get into. But in terms of whatever they put out, if they say, here's the Kindle, and then something gets patched out, individually gets patched out, but the rest of it can still function for what its intended purpose. The intended purpose of like what are the paper Kindles or whatever. Like its purpose is to read. But if there was another function where you could talk to it to tell it to like turn page, or an audio to like it'll read it to you if you're disabled or something, and then they disable that feature, but it still does the read, like it still has the paper.
but what
book or
if you
whatever.
only bought
still
it for that
functions.
one feature? It's the
Yeah.
same as bricking.
And in my personal opinion, the terms of service has been changed, and then thus you deserve a refund, and then you could go buy one that does do it. That's my humble opinion. But again, nobody cares about my opinion, except people watching this for some reason.
Let's
But-
get you on video.
The nuance of our industry, all in the name of saving games. I can't agree with that. So let's go into why this is happening, right? So
You can't agree with something you don't understand. Of course, nobody can agree with something they don't understand. That's a dumb take.
why did this start in the first place? What is the specific cases they've called out that are egregious? And they have one. It's the crew. So action on.
This guy loves to build straw men to fight because he clearly can't fight an actual one. But the crew is an active lawsuit that is showing the problem. They took that problem and said, this could affect a lot of games, like Need for Speed 2015, for example, or literally any FIFA game ever. Like literally.
Well, okay.
It's a dumb concept to take.
Let's just be very clear. The lawsuit alleges and claims there is a problem, has not been proven in court.
Well, that's because it's still ongoing. What I'm saying is that the crew is showing that there is a problem when you have the entire, because they have allegedly confirmed that all of the single player files are in the game that you download. It's on the game. So if they cut off the live service, the problem was they were removing it from libraries. So they could not play it single player offline. All they have to do is patch it so it doesn't have
Again,
a live service
if
function.
that is true, we are in agreement.
Yes.
On
Well, that's the claim of the crew, which you
Yeah.
can go research that if you want to. I kind of gave the cliff notes of it.
Yeah.
But essentially, if that's the case, in any game, like for example, Call of Duty Black Ops 6, it has a normal, everyday single player mode, zombie mode or whatever, that you can play by yourself. And you should be able to play offline, but they keep it as an online only. So if they ever remove
okay.
Black Ops, you should lose the live action, and you should be able to still play it.
The battery's down at 40%, so let's video.
Plug it in.
The Crew. The video game The Crew, published by Ubisoft, was recently destroyed for all players and had a player base of at least 12 million people. Due to the game's size and France's strong consumer protection laws, this represents one of the best opportunities to hold a publisher accountable for this action. If we're successful in charges being pressed against Ubisoft, this can have a ripple effect on the video games industry to prevent publishers from destroying more games. First off, I don't like the idea in this that it has a player base of 12 million people. That is not how long-running games work. There is a large number of people that buy the game, and that player...
Personally, I think it's irrelevant how many people play it. The fact that one person's doing it, you're still screwing somebody over, but that's a different story.
Base slowly dwindles off until nobody is playing it anymore. If there's any costs associated with keeping the game online, which this was an online video game, then...
We're not... No one's arguing that it's because it was online and that's where people were playing it. What we're saying is that when it comes offline, you can't just remove the game from my library when all you have to do is patch it so that the stuff that's online doesn't exist. No one's saying you have to maintain it. That's not the initiative. This is a bad faith argument.
Eventually, it costs more to keep it online than it does to keep running it, right? So the cost outweighs the amount of...
And again, no one cares because what we're saying is that if you're going to take it offline, patch it so it's not online, but people can still play it. That's what people are saying.
Income for it. There are bad business practices that can occur in there. There are companies that will sell a online-only game as a single-player experience and kind of just put it into the TOS and hide it. But not all companies do that. When they do, we should...
And even if it is, it should be null and void, because if you can't sign away certain rights, then you can't sign away any rights. So what's the point of the terms of service being that way? If you're not breaking a law, it shouldn't be in the terms of service. But again, that's a terms of service argument. I'm not going to go into that.
Should be calling out that specific company, not all companies. So let's take a look at this and find out more about the Crew itself. If we pull up their Wikipedia, we can see that the Crew was actually created in 2014, which, much to the hatred of all of us oldies on the internet, was 10 years ago. Oh.
That does suck.
So this was an online-only racing video game developed by Ubisoft.
Why are we using Wikipedia? Wikipedia is not a reliable source. Oh my gosh.
Ivory Tower and Ubisoft Reflections, and published by Ubisoft. So all Ubisoft, right? With that in mind, it said it was a scaled-down recreation of the contiguous United States and included both role-playing and large-scale multiplayer elements. So it had a massive multiplayer component to it. It is an online-only service-based game, and they shut it down 10 years later. On March 31st, 2024, Ubisoft shut down the game's servers, rendering the game unplayable, which is normal for...
And nobody cares that they shut down the servers. He's not understanding this.
Live service games. The only thing that I can see in here that could be a problem is if they post it as not an online-only experience.
I don't know if he knows what happened with the Crew. Like, literally what the lawsuit actually is entailing.
But everything that I found online shows that the game was always marketed as online only.
It doesn't matter what was marketed. The game itself, the argument of the Crew people is that it's not on the box. It's not on the box. So therefore, you can't do this. It's the same thing as like, have you been hearing about the Nintendo Switch 2 games, the cartridge or the empty cartridge ones where they just like have a code or key code or whatever for the third party stuff? For the third party stuff.
I saw something about that.
So most third party games on Switch 2 don't have the actual data on the card. Now, Cyberpunk 2077 Ultimate Edition does. It's one of the rare ones. But the Nintendo first party has the data on the cards. The third parties don't. The third parties are like, why are our games selling so poorly? It's way below what our expectations were. It's like, I don't know why. Maybe because you don't have that stuff on the card? Like, literally?
Well, they're using the League of Legends model, basically.
Yes and no. I mean, you could just download the game. That's the stupid part. It's just a download game. It's just, the thing is that if we're going to download the game, why have a card? There's no reason for it. Because you still need to put the card in regardless. So even if you move it from one to the other,
the card is probably a borrowed practice. The bad idea with time has come. I don't know if you know this or not, but in the professional software market, like for say OrCAD or for PSpice or AutoCAD or whatever, you don't actually buy the software anymore. They mail you like a thumb drive with a code, and you put that in, and then it will either run it through like AutoCAD Online or whatever, or download a local instance that still is running online, but your local instance. All that's ever on your thing you purchase is a code, right? So your little cartridge or thumb drive or whatever has a code. And I'm willing to bet some software engineer says, "Hey, wait a minute, let's use this for video games," and
Well,
thus we get
from
fired
what I
about it.
understand, it's allegedly more expensive to put the data onto the cartridge than it is
Well,
to
yeah,
not
of
put it
course
on.
it is.
Sure, but here's the thing: is they're seeing now it's more expensive to not put the data on the actual thing because they're below
Well, it's
their stuff
always
by a
it's like we
lot.
talked about with inflation before, right? It's there's the good way when you increase the value of the product, right? And therefore money inflates, but you make the money more worthwhile, so to speak. And there's a bad way where you print less of it that's less value, right? So the good way with these cartridges is you distribute the software on the cartridge, right? The bad way is you distribute a product code and you
Well,
know
the people who buy Nintendo buy a lot of them. I won't say every single one because everyone has their own opinions on this, but a lot of them purchase because it's physical. Like when they do a collector's like limited
No, yeah,
edition.
I totally understand.
Like for example,
I purchased physical media myself. I totally get it.
so
Okay.
Phantom Breaker, Switch,
Yep.
limited edition, but the actual game's on this thing. If
Yeah.
I open, or I'll even use a current one, Borderlands 4 Collector's Edition doesn't even come with the game. It's $150.
For example, if I mean, when I buy
Why would I
like
buy it?
when I buy World of Warcraft updates, I usually get the collector's edition, but the digital one because I don't have room for the physical product in my house anymore. But
If there's a physical product, I buy it.
well, no, you
That's
can buy a
like,
box for it, but the game won't come in the box. The game is entirely online now.
well, I know, but I'm saying like this right here, Baldur's Gate 3. I bought the actual physical box. I did not play Baldur's Gate 3 for a long time until I could get this because I wasn't going to buy the game twice, for one. This is the PC version, so it comes with its own installer. So even if it goes off of Steam or whatever the case might be, because it comes with a Steam key and a disc. So if, let's say, it goes off of Steam, I still have a disc that I can install the entire game onto my computer and play.
Correct. But a lot of physical collector's editions don't come with the game anymore. They just come with the
I know,
download code.
because they're stupid and I don't like them.
Yeah.
But my point is that if they were available, like I bought, which they're not over here, but over on my game,
Yeah, and
on my game tower, I have
a
I have a bunch of the Guild Wars 1. I have all of the Guild Wars 1 expansion boxes.
yeah,
in
we're in
physical form.
agreement there.
So
We're in agreement on that.
in that regard, it's silly. But the idea that he's like, oh, this is an online only is stupid. But it's also like, well, we can't do this because of blah, blah, blah. He's not listening to the actual presentation and understanding anything about it.
If you're going to be buying an online only game, that means it can only run when it's online.
They have actual discs for this game, by the way, because it's an old game.
And if the servers need to shut down in the future, far in the future, it makes sense to me for the access to that game to be cut. If it's
And it's okay if they cut that access to the game on the online live stream. No one's arguing for that.
online only. If it's a single player experience that has online only functionality specifically just to shut down the game in the future, and the online only doesn't actually add any gameplay functionality, I'd agree with you.
If it's a live service that has a single player function, it doesn't matter if it's marketed as a live service function, it has a single player function.
Well, okay. But remember, the model he used with League of Legends is the game is not installed locally. Like there are games that have
Again,
single player.
he's arguing a point no one's making. There is no physical copy of League of Legends in existence. There is no single player mode per se in existence.
No, but there are games like League of Legends which are single player.
Like what?
I used to play one on Steam. It was I don't remember. Like my friend showed it to me. It's not like League. It was what when I say like League of Legends, I don't mean a shoot 'em up. I mean where the game is entirely online, but all that runs on your local machine is graphics. What was that called? I actually got. When did I get? I got it right after I got tired of Age of Empires 2.
One does not get tired of Age of Empires 2. What are you?
Well, you go to like you get tired of like because I think they stopped making expansions for it. You know. Anyway,
Well, they
point I'm making
maybe they
is,
did then. They're still making them now, but yeah.
yeah, well, because they found there's money in it because Age of Empires 3 sucked, basically.
Well, they're on Age of Empires 4, but yes.
I think
Age of
4
Empires 2
sucked
is
as
the one
well.
everybody liked.
Yeah, 3 and 4 suck.
I haven't played 4, but I have 3. I didn't like it.
The interface, the interface, they went to this like pseudo 3D bullshit.
It wasn't the interface that bothered me. It was they left the historicity behind. I like the historicity.
That may be true. I don't disagree with that. What
And
I'm
also the
saying
music is fire.
a lot of us like for Age of Empire style games that 2D style interface.
Sure,
and they came with this weird sort of 3D.
They have some. You like the sprites, basically, yes.
You know, it's just visually more fun to play it in Age of Empires 2 style.
I mean, they basically did Age of Empires 3 the way they did Battle for Middle Earth. They did 3D models.
Yeah,
that's it. It's fine. I don't that wouldn't put me off, but yeah.
That's a shitty business practice, but that's really rare. And in the specific cases where it does happen, we should call out that, not just all games and not all live service games. Further, there's more context to this too. The Crew itself came out in 2014, but it actually had a sequel that came out in 2018. And then it had another sequel that came out in 2023. And if we go to the Crew's SteamDB, which again is not going to be all of the player base for this. It's only going to show the ones who were playing it through Steam. It was on multiple platforms. And we look at the max here. It did start out with a sizable amount of community, and then it degraded, and it had a major drop.
What does this have to do with anything? The volume of people playing the game is irrelevant. I don't know why he's making this point. Do you have any input?
I'm guessing it's because he's thinking that the issue is forcing companies to pay to do this. I mean, to pay to make these games standalone.
But you're not forcing them to pay. You're forcing them to patch.
So you have to pay people to do that.
You're paying them while it's live anyway.
But you have to. But if you want to like make the game functionally 100% standalone offline, you have to rewrite software code. And you have to pay engineers to do that. You have to pay people.
But you should have those people on staff anyway.
But again, once your game is done, you fire them.
I mean, if it's live service, probably not, because you still have
problems. There's very high turnover.
Well, I'm not. I agree. There's high turnover rate, but like you at least keep skeleton crew because somebody somewhere.
Not once you turn.
It's going to have they find a bug that breaks the game all of a sudden, and then everybody has a game breaking.
Once the game is end of life, they never bother to patch it again.
I know, but also this is something that they're trying to like retroactively understand, so that when it happens in the future, it's like, oh, you're making this game to be this way. So when you are finally doing your last bit, where you're not going to have developers work on this anymore, and you're going to fire your staff or whatever the case might be, have them make a patch, hold on to the patch, and whenever you go offline, you put the patch in.
But you still have to pay them to do that.
They're already getting paid. You're paying them as you go. It's not like
you're paying to do the product you're making money on. Why
yes.
Are you paying?
So while you're making money on it, make the patch.
So you're paying them for say 10,000 hours to make the existing game, and now you want to force them to pay another 10 hours to each person.
I mean, I don't know how many people would actually take to do this in terms of just switching it from client to client or client to whatever.
Probably several dozen.
Okay, and if they already have them on staff and they're already paying them, say, by the way,
you're paid by the hour for this sort of work.
Okay. Are you making money from this game or not? Like this is part of the problem, is that they're making a game assuming they can just throw out responsibility at any moment in time. And in some ways they can. But I'm saying
we're not debating. I'm telling you his position.
I know, but I'm saying that doesn't make logical sense compared to the argument.
He's saying because he owns a gaming company that essentially he's saying I'm not going to pay people to do this.
He has a gaming company?
This guy has a game. He just mentioned he has a game company.
I heard
his own development. He has his own gaming studio.
Then he would make a game that he would know would probably get him pulled into a lawsuit at some point, or do the very thing he just said was a scummy.
He at the beginning he has his own game development company for 8 years.
Oh, okay, I must have missed that, but I knew he was in
That's
the
why I
industry, but
said to you at the beginning, understanding his perspective is important. Okay. He mentioned his resume, and you said I don't care about all that.
But I don't. His resume is irrelevant to the. He's already misconstrued the actual
He's
point of
giving you
selling
his
games
perspective based on how he has to work with this
based
industry,
on a flawed understanding of what is being presented. He
and
chose to make this video.
he's telling you what he will do, which is he's not going to pay people for his games extra money to make them available offline.
Is he making live service games?
I don't know.
Well, I mean, you don't have to pay them to make it offline if it's already offline, so that would be really silly.
Maybe he only makes live. Again, let's keep going.
Okay.
Off in 2018, which is the same year that it launched a sequel. This is normal. When a sequel comes out, a lot of the player base, if the sequel doesn't suck, will move over to it. And then the servers effectively die. You can't run a live service game on this few players. You can't.
That's not the argument. Stop lying about the argument.
Most of the time, especially not if there's anything else that goes into it. And if we go into that anything else, and we could see that there was license problems. So on December 14th, 2023, Ubisoft delisted the crew and its expansions from digital platforms, suspended sales of microtransactions.
See, it's one thing to take them off so they can't be purchased further. It's another thing to remove them from people's libraries.
And announced that the game's servers would shut down on March 31st. So they gave them 3 months. Usually I would say, hey, 6 months is probably a better deal, but if they're going to do 3 months, they're going to do 3 months. The only thing that I'd be interested outside of that is if there was a contractual obligation to do more than 3 months and they didn't follow it, if it was in the terms of service or not. Citing upcoming server infrastructure and licensing constraints. What were those licensing constraints? Well, it turns out that all of the cars in the game were licensed from the car companies. And a 10
This goes back to my viewpoints on licensing. Oh my gosh.
Well, again, we talked about it. The solution is to make a version of the game called Open Crew or whatever.
No, the solution is that if you make it in the freaking time period that you have the license, that whatever you made in that time period is for that particular product, works for that particular product in perpetuity. That's it. Like they can't do it for the next Crew game. They can't do it for the Crew game after that or anything else because they don't have the license for those. Unless they re-up the licenses again, that's fine.
And the easy solution is just make Open Crew, and then have someone mod the Ferrari.
Who's making the Open Crew?
Well, these stop giving out whatever people. They should do it.
The who?
The stop killing game people should do it.
And how are they going to fund it?
Crowdsourcing.
Well, apparently nobody plays the game anymore. So who's going to fund it?
Well, then they're shit out of luck.
And I'm saying that's not going to cut it, in my opinion, but that's a different story. So,
10-year running game likely means that they had license to them for 10 years. And that means that it would likely reopen for negotiation.
Which, in that sense, you should put that information on the freaking game that, by the way, this might shut off in 10 years. Is kind of important information when you make a purchase.
Now understand that.
Now, if you cram it in like 7,000 pages of TOS, that no one's going to read. Nobody reads those. Literally nobody. By definition, you can just assume that the terms of service is null and void.
Well, just like any legalese document, they have to be 100,000 pages long now.
But they're not telling you anything. Like you could read all 7,000 pages and learn.
Well, they're telling you lots of stuff. They're
telling you a lot of weird language to say nothing.
We discussed that before. Everything like the legal everything like you can't just take a dictionary definition of a word. It has to be in a legal agreement.
If the dictionary definition doesn't work of a word, then nothing in the legal is going to make sense.
The only legally acceptable definition for a word must be in law or contract. That's been established contract.
But in law and contract has to have a definition come from somewhere. And if it's not from the word, then what the frick are they mentioning?
Regardless of the source of the definition, it cannot be used for a legal reason unless you put it into the law or a contract.
So if they say, don't do X thing, if the X thing is understood by literally everyone on the planet in that particular language as Exhibit A, if they don't specifically say Exhibit A and then literally play out the entirety of the thing, nobody knows what it is.
You are correct. You are correct.
So where do they define the?
Because you
can't define the. The is just a part of a grammar. There's nothing there.
There's usually a provision like using the English language as defined under the following document or whatever.
if you could use the English language, then maybe you use the words. Now, you could specify we use the definitions of a particular dictionary to write this document of a particular year,
But
so that
then
that book is going to be
entire
the reference
content
point.
of that dictionary has to be in the law.
No,
Yes.
no, because if I say I got this from the Merriam-Webster dictionary of 2006. Well, the dictionary of 2006 exists, so you can go look at it and find the definitions.
Whether or not the dictionary is physically in the law, it's in the law by virtue of that reference.
I'm not sure what I understand what you're
Whether
saying.
or not you take the entire context of 2006 Merriam-Webster and print it in the law, in 100 pages of the law, or not, the fact that you do make that saying that we're using the 2006 Merriam-Webster second print, blah, 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 puts the entire content of that dictionary into that law.
Sure. That's what I'm saying. That's fine. Because
That
now if I bring and I say,
understand,
hey, in this dictionary of the 2006 Merriam-Webster dictionary, this is what the word means, that's already there.
The entire content of that dictionary is now subject to adjudication, which means you can go to court and say, wait a minute, we're using Merriam-Webster 2006, and that says the word frog means this. I want to go all the way to the Supreme Court disputing that. 20 years later,
but
Supreme Court says,
you can't dispute what is there.
Yeah, you could. You do it all the time.
How do you dispute the definition of a word that's right in front of your eyes?
They do this in lawsuits all the time. It's the way the law works.
Just because you can have a lawsuit doesn't mean it's a valid lawsuit.
And the validity is determined by the final trial resolution.
Like, judges get mad if you bring a stupid lawsuit to them, and they know that it's just like
when you bring a lawsuit in front of a judge, the judge has to make a determination: is it the lawsuit valid based on precedent and established law? And in that case, the weight. By the way, the weight is usually considered to be in favor of the person bringing the lawsuit. So, in that case, the judge can say, okay, based on whatever this precedent by the appellate court in 1973. You have no standing to bring this lawsuit. You can then appeal that judge's decision for the next 15 years.
Well, I mean, I'm sure you could appeal it, but I'm saying that if a judge throws out a lawsuit because you're wasting the court's time in a frivolous lawsuit,
and you can appeal that.
Sure, but you're going to be on a wait list because it's frivolous.
You're on a wait list either way.
That's the problem. There should not have to be a need for that much of like the whole we're free to sue about literally anything and everything is not a good system.
But it is a great system. It's part of the greatest nation in the history of the universe.
That's not a good argument for that.
The fact that you can sue someone who screws with you and get civil redress is part of why it's one of the big things you have
to have an actual case. You can't just be like, I spilled coffee.
And the process of determination of that case.
It touched my table, and now my table has coffee stains on it. You can't go sue them for that. It's your fault.
Yes, you can.
No, you should not be able to. That's your problem because you did the action.
How do you know that's my problem? How was that proven?
How does coffee in a cup get on outside of the cup? It's poured.
Someone spilled it.
Yes, it spills, it pours.
Or the cup wasn't made of a proper material and it leaked through it.
Well, then you can sue them for the cup. You can't sue them for the product. It's not the coffee's fault.
In either case, and all the validity is determined in the court, not before the court.
And if it's shown that it was a frivolous, you should be fined an exorbitant amount of money.
You are. If you file a lawsuit and lose it, you pay court costs and possibly fines for everything.
I'm talking like insane. Like it's loss. It's not just I have a fallback plan. No.
Ridiculous.
That's game over. You're going to fly to the moon because you ain't got nothing left.
Court costs are the cost of your opponent's legal bills.
Yeah, so I'm saying beyond that. I'm saying it needs to be excessive.
If you sue and lose, and your opponent spent $1 million trying to defend themselves,
you need to owe $10 million. Yes,
that's how it works.
No, not $1 million. $10 million.
The judge can impose additional sanctions.
Anytime a person brings a frivolous lawsuit, they should be fined excessively.
Well, again, once
You would have a lot less lawsuits. I guarantee you that.
Again, to determine whether the lawsuit's frivolous, you have to have a trial.
Sure, but the whole point is that it keeps you from bringing a frivolous lawsuit, clogging up the courts over dumb stuff that doesn't matter, that doesn't affect
courts
things.
aren't clogged up by a number of lawsuits. Our courts are clogged up because on any given time, 25% of the judiciary is vacant.
And if that's the case, then you put people in power. If that's however they do that, you can. There's a system.
Because basically, judges are appointed by politics, and when you have a federal level, for example, when the president and the Senate are different politically, it slows down the judge appointees a lot.
We're going to run through this faster because I'm running out of time.
Yeah, that's good.
So.
Yeah.
That's speculation, but I've seen this type of a deal many times in the industry while I've been working in it. So it's not unlikely. If you're going to have to renegotiate on a game that has so few players and is not turning a profit anymore, you're probably just going to forgo the renegotiation. And if those servers are aging, you're not going to want to recreate that infrastructure. And there are some people that will say, well, just make it all single player. Well, I've explained that doesn't make any sense in the first place. If you're making it all single player, you have to carve all.
But they're not. That's not what they're saying.
Let him finish what he just said.
That's very important. Money. When you already have sequels out and the game has basically no players left anyway, it makes more sense to just move on. I don't find that to be a problem from the developer perspective, and I understand that people find that to be a problem from the player perspective. These are two different ideologies. And
well, yes.
So what he just said is very important, okay?
From the purchaser's perspective, it's a problem that the thing that they bought is no longer working.
Entirely single player, right? Then to get those Ferraris and whatever license from Ferrari, it's going to cost a lot more money.
Why?
Because that's how much Ferrari charges.
Well, if you're paying the same amount for a live service, why does it matter?
You're not paying the same amount. When you get an enterprise license, like for example, Windows, for example, our enterprise license at our company, we pay like $10 million or whatever for. If we had to purchase all those copies individually, we'd probably spend $400 million on Windows.
Oh, okay, but then make the game single player. Add a live service feature with a pre-patch that can be patched at any time as part of the development.
Now you're going to have to pay Ferrari a lot more money for that.
But if it's live service, why would you have... Okay, if it's single player offline at all times, you pay more to Ferrari. But if you put it online, you pay magically less money than you put it online. Because
not everyone is playing at the same time. So when you have your
what
Ferrari
does the player have to do with anything? This is about use of it in the game.
Listen to me. When you make a license Ferrari for your video game, the license says you can have 500,000 licensed Ferraris running at one time. Okay, in the game, and you use it, and all the players online.
That's a problem with the licensing system, and again, that should be addressed.
Again, this is the way it works, and
I get that's how that works. I'm saying that's not how that should work.
Well, why should Ferrari then license anything ever out?
Because they like money.
But they're not going to make as much money in your way.
They're not going to make any money if they don't license it out to anybody.
Well, they're run by Italians. They'll do it to spite you.
Do what to spite?
Not license out on purpose.
Okay. Then everybody stops getting Ferraris in their games. Whoopity-doo. There's plenty of other cars.
Every company will do that.
And if every company does that, they don't make income off of this.
This is ancillary income. They don't care about it.
Then why do they do it at all? It's marketing.
Because someone said, "Hey, we can make an extra 1% of our income on this."
Okay, then they lose 1% income.
And someone okay, we lost.
Somebody can go out and make a brand new car design and put it in their game and make it look eerily similar but slightly different.
But the players want to see Ferraris, not Ferraris.
Sure, I'm sure they do want to see Ferraris, but they also like to play the game that they purchase.
And again, the point he's making is that to make these games standalone, this company would have to go out and pay Ferrari another $100 million or whatever for that patch you want. Okay, now I'm not. Why
would they have to pay them anything for that patch?
Because the license that they got was not for a standalone game; it was for an online game.
Well, The Crew is not made as an online-only game if it has the standalone stuff in it as well.
Well, again, I tend to agree with you, but I'm explaining he sees The Crew as an online-only game.
Well, I'm sure he does, but he also has a very weird understanding of how things operate because half the time they're
Well,
incorrect.
he's understanding it from his perspective as a game developer. Yeah.
Well, let's just run through this. We're getting bogged down.
That's okay to have two different ideologies. I just won't agree with it because I understand the burden that puts.
And I want to agree with you. Congratulations.
If we raise that problem in the way that we are right now, if you try to tell me that every studio needs to run their live service game indefinitely or not want to run one at all, then no one's going to run them. And we're going to miss out
Good.
on adventures like Final Fantasy XIV.
Oh, no.
And even though I don't play anymore, League of Legends or any
Oh, no.
other live service game, any of them. You're talking everything, like even phone games, as funny as that is.
Oh, no.
A lot of people don't realize that phone games require online-only activity.
No. I can download Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic on my phone and play it without
The
internet.
vast majority of phone games are online only.
He didn't say the vast majority. He said all.
Well, he may not know there are.
He made what we call an error in his words, but yes.
He may not know there that they've made the technology.
But he works in the industry. He's supposed to know this stuff.
He works in his industry, his company. He's speaking from his perspective.
He's worked with Blizzard. He's worked in the industry of video games.
Blizzard works the same way. Blizzard does online only, basically.
Yeah. Well,
Blizzard has modified every single game they currently
Okay, they actively modified everything, sure, but that doesn't mean all the games are inherently online only. They're not like MOBAs.
The
or
older
anything.
version of the game you can still play standalone. Every Blizzard game you get through the Battle.net app or whatever.
Yeah, I have Diablo 1 on disc, and no,
Yeah.
I am not letting them screw that. I can also get it on GOG too, which is nice.
Well, the Diablo you would play, like the Diablo Remastered or whatever, isn't your game. Like it has entirely updated graphics and whatnot. So
I know, but whatever's on GOG is DRM free, so it is mine.
What about things like Pokemon Go? What about stuff like Monster Hunter Now?
Why do I care? You're trying to use the emotional argument of, oh no, but if we do it your way, we're going to lose all this great content, and that's very subjective. But then other things will be innovated. That's how humans work. If you're in the video game industry, you would know this, that if you all of a sudden had a door shut and you had to do something else, you would do something else.
What about any of these? I would never get any of it. And that's why I think
know.
this needs to not be vague. It needs to be specific about the business practice it's trying to defeat, which is specifically companies that are doing this under the guise of it being a single-player game, but adding online-only function.
You just said you didn't know what it was, and now you're telling us exactly what you don't know it is. That it's the problem. That doesn't make sense.
That is not necessary and doesn't add any gameplay elements. That's the problem. So now we're going to go to Ross, otherwise known as the Cursed
This is the guy who actually did the Stop Killing Games.
Farms, the creator of this initiative, and one of the ones that's pushing it the most online. I'm going to let him say exactly why he thinks that this will go through very easily and why it is important, and then I'm going to tell you why I don't agree with it.
Comes law in the EU? Yeah, it might be. Now, it's not a guarantee, but I think if we get the signatures, this passes. Why do I say that? Well, it's a few factors. Politicians like easy wins, and this doesn't require them to do much at all. And unless it involves gambling or protecting children, politicians generally don't care about video games. So this isn't of big consequence to them or most of their constituencies.
I'm going to stop it there for a moment. The assertion that politicians just like easy wins, so this legislation will go through, but the politicians don't care about a multi-billion-dollar global industry and that it doesn't matter to their constituencies is incredibly absurd to me. I don't think this is the right direction.
Politicians do love easy wins. That's an obvious one. Whether they care about video games themselves, I don't think they do. Whether or not that might affect their income, yes, I think they care.
They care about the multi-billion-dollar part.
They care about a corporation. They don't care about video games. So they're technically both right on the second one, but he's wrong on the first one.
Direction at all for a movement like this. I think it's incredibly damaging and it makes our entire industry look bad, both on the player side and the developer side. If we're going to be putting forward anything that may eventually turn into legislation, it should be passing because it's the right thing to do for consumers.
I really wish he would just put forth an alternative that he himself would not necessarily support, but he would say this is acceptable for standard. He doesn't do this.
And developers, and that there's some kind of a middle ground, not just because it's an easy win and politicians don't care. This sets us off on a completely wrong foot.
EU law is already unclear on a lot of this practice anyway.
That's probably very true.
And that's dangerous. If we're going to be setting precedent, which could change the way that law works all the way down the road, then we need to be sending the right message, which this is sending a vague
You don't know what the right message is because you have not proffered one.
message that doesn't cover the actual problem. So this is not a win to me. This is a huge risk.
And we would be making it easy for them to settle it. It falls in line with other consumer practices. You know how when you buy something, you're generally allowed to keep it?
In the case of live service games, in the terms of service for those, you are not buying the game. You're buying a license to the game. And that's the part that's really different here. If we don't like the idea of live service games as a whole, I get it.
And I argue that buying licenses to games is stupid and you should never have that. But you should just buy the game or not buy the game.
don't play live service games then. Don't agree to those terms. But if we're into this weird idea that we need to get rid of all live service games or damage that practice in any way to keep in line with consumer policies, it is in line with consumer policies. If it wasn't, it wouldn't be there in the first place. So this doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. You're not buying the game, you're buying a license to the game. In the niche cases where a studio is trying to sell a game as if you are buying it or purchasing it or using that language specifically and they give you a live service game instead, I agree that should change. That language should change. You are not purchasing the game, you're not buying the game, you are paying to have a license to a live service experience. I get that. Is that what this is doing though? The initiative is not trying to call that out specifically. It's trying to say that all games need to stay in a functional, playable state, which is not calling out the language.
He's saying that if it requires server maintenance and they need to stop the servers because they can't afford to, then a game that has a non-server-based function should be kept in a non-serviceable or non-live service function after the servers are shut down. That's all it says.
That is being used to manipulate the player. Call that out specifically, not this vague bullshit.
And finally, this is a diversion from really serious topics that politicians would prefer not to deal with.
That's really gross to me as well. The idea that this is just a diversion from serious topics and they can get in.
It's really gross to me. You know what's really gross? Game companies screwing over their players. That's really gross. But no. A politician wanting to be diverted, which is what politicians do. They don't want to deal with the topic because they either disagree with it or otherwise, and get to have something that makes them look like they're doing their jobs. Shocking. The politicians like to look good for their constituents and say, hey, but we did all this stuff for you. Well, we're doing our job. Vote for me again. That's literally what it is.
An easy win in and we can just push it through and there won't be a lot of pushback on it and they're not going to have to think about it too hard. That's crazy dangerous, dude. If you're going to be...
So is creating entire systems of licenses, copyrights, and trademarks and everything, and not thinking about what could happen with those. Okay, but that works.
Setting precedent. If you're going to be putting forward something that you want to start a conversation to eventually become legislation, and these are the reasons for it, not only can I not agree with the initiative, but I can't agree with you. And I think that the tactics that you're using here are really disgusting. So yes, I won't agree with that.
What tactics? He's pointing out what life is like.
I won't agree with Russ. There's no way around that. I think this is gross. To sum it all up, no, I will not be supporting the initiative Stop Killing Games. You're not going to change my mind on it because I find this language to be incredibly...
You can't support it. Literally. I mean, the thing you could support is the idea of it, but you can't support it.
Vague and damaging to the rest of our industry. I think that...
So what's your solution? What's the problem? How would you fix this? Oh, wait. You don't have one.
It'll be bad for both developers and players down the line in the way that it is currently written. And I think that starting a conversation that doesn't get to the core of the issue is both wasted time and leads to potentially bad outcomes. So if we want to talk about this, let's talk about the actual bad business practices. In the case that a studio is making a live service game and they sell it to you as a product, they say that you are purchasing the game or you are buying the game, when in reality you're actually purchasing or buying a license to that game. I think that we should be fighting about that. That needs to go away. A player should be well informed at the point of purchase that they are
Agreed.
purchasing a license, not buying a game.
I also think they shouldn't be licenses, but that's a different story.
And the reason that we have those licenses in the case of client-server interactions like we had before, we're talking about client-server games, is so that they can ban you when you cheated them. They revoke your license. That's why they revoke your license, to protect the gameplay of every other player that you're impacting when you cheat at these games. That needs to exist.
They just block your account.
They can't do that
Why can't they block your account if you're caught cheating?
because you don't. If you own the game and they don't and not a license to the game, they can't stop other players from playing with you.
Then make the online interaction a license. Don't make the actual base game a license.
Well, that would cost more money.
Why would it cost more money?
Because you have to develop two versions of the game.
No, you don't. You have a single player and then you have the client side.
Remember, the client side doesn't run the game. The client side just
so if the
downloads.
server hosts the multiplayer live service active version of it.
The server, the 8,000 processors running some specialized version of Linux in with hundreds of VMs, that server is running the game, right? And it's the entire game is running there, and all it's doing is sending the information your graphics card needs to put it on your screen. That's all it's coming in your network, right? Okay. To put that on your local machine, you have to create a version of that game for Windows or Linux or whatever your operating system you want to do it for is, and then have validate it with basically entirely another software team to do that.
Or you just take all the data that it installs and take the stuff and separate it from the multiplayer and just say, this will be downloaded as well.
They don't write the game like that, though.
But the whole point of this thing is to say that's how you do it from now on. That's the whole point of the Stop Killing Games.
And again, but then you lose the value of online-only games.
Why would I lose the value of online-only games?
You would take away the profitability of these companies to run those games.
But if you keep swindling me year after year, game after game, because the license disappears,
He's not talking about purely standalone games. I think he didn't agree with us that if it's a purely standalone game and they turn it off, they brick it.
but there's lots of games that are multi. They both do
But
online only as well as a single player only.
The difference between online only and like some games do online interactively, meaning you're running the game locally and you're interacting with the server, you're still running it locally.
Whatever data you have on a live service is the same stuff that can be put into a .exe. Like,
you mean the code? Stop saying data. Data is what comes out. You're talking about the code, the algorithm.
Whatever. If I go to download my disc copy of Age of Empires, the original, or Age of Empires 2, the original.
Age of Empires runs locally on your machine.
I know. I'm not talking about how it runs. I'm talking about the files. The
file is designed to run locally on your machine.
The files have to be there for any of it to work. Those files are on the server for any of it to work.
No. Yes, when you install Age of Empires, right, the game runs on your computer. Right?
Yes.
You understand that, right?
Yes.
And the interaction online transmits data from your computer to a server that interacts sometimes with AIs and sometimes
peer-to-peer, because I could do it on Game Ranger too. Yes.
Correct. But the peer-to-peer functionality is separate from the client server functionality.
Sure.
And the game runs entirely on your PC, right?
Sure.
Yes. That executable file and all associated data are coded to run on your Windows 10 instance with your consumer graphics card and consumer CPU. Okay.
So when you make this game and to put it on live service in the future, you can code it to work in both ways.
You have to basically have an entirely separate code to do that.
Then don't make the game. If you're not going to be like, I'm going to think ahead and think of this could really be problematic.
Why would they need to think ahead? They know they can make $100 million just making a live service only game. Why would they bother with the rest of it?
Because they don't want to get sued?
Why would they get sued?
Why is Ubisoft getting sued?
Well, the claim
because they didn't think about something and it came back and bit them in the butt. That's the whole point.
The crew is making the claim. They're alleging, not proven, they're alleging that they have a standalone game that got bricked.
No, they're alleging it has a standalone function because the data's there. Like they could be offline and still play the game.
The program is there.
If the game is offline, like you are not connected to the internet and you can still play it, then why are you pulling it out of my library? That's what they're saying.
Well, that's what they're alleging that occurred. Okay.
I am aware that they're alleging. I've said that multiple times about that.
Ubisoft's position is going to be that even if you have all this stuff locally, it can't work without our servers.
They can allege that, but if it works without the servers, then it works without the servers.
Well, that's a claim that has to be proven in court.
Sure, Ubisoft has to prove that claim, but they removed the game beforehand.
The burden of proof is on the crew, not on Ubisoft.
The crew is Ubisoft's game.
The people, when I say the crew, I mean the people suing, okay?
You mean
the burden of proof is on those suing.
I know. I'm saying they allegedly have shown this. And if they allegedly have shown this...
But I don't care what they allegedly have shown until something is proven in court.
I can't tell you if they did or didn't because I haven't seen them actually do it. I'm saying allegedly because I'm not privy to this information.
And I know that. What I'm saying to you is...
So why are you getting on my case about it?
I'm not getting on your case. What I'm saying
It sounds like you are getting on my case.
I'm not going to take the crew's side, the company people suing.
That's why I said allegedly. If in the situation they are telling the truth, here's my position. If in the situation they are not telling the truth, this is my position. That's how I do literally everything.
And I'm not, again, you're misinterpreting me.
I'm arguing from their position, presuming it's true, and stating it's allegedly. So if it is true, would you agree with it?
If it is true that they have the way I say it, a standalone game that got bricked, I agree with it. Yes.
Okay, that's all it has to be. No, it doesn't have to be wishy-washy. It doesn't have to be nothing else. Because if it does exist, or I'll do it this way. If Ubisoft is right, here's my opinion. If the crew players are right, then this is my position. That's how I would do it.
Okay. And I will say it this way. so long as the crew's position is that Ubisoft doesn't have to spend any additional money to make that game available offline. So all Ubisoft have to do is put it back on their
Well,
their-
the
their-
original was that they pulled it from their library so they couldn't play it.
well, I'm saying if there's also a lawsuit besides the monetary damages, is they put it back in their libraries and Ubisoft can still shut down their servers and the crew can play their games.
I don't understand why it would be difficult for them to just flick a switch to turn off online accessibility and the game still run because it's on their
So-
computer locally.
That
That doesn't make sense to me. But either way, we'll just skip all that because we got to get through this really quick.
but
Yeah.
it needs to be better informed to the player at time of purchase. So I agree on that. This doesn't bring that up though. It just attacks all video games that have online only components and says that they need to keep being able to be played indefinitely. That doesn't make any sense to me. Aside from
Not indefinitely online.
that, a lot of people really like live service games as
A lot of people like really stupid things too. Congratulations.
they exist now.
That's
So
an
trying to
anomaly
kill off
attack,
all
bro.
live
Huh?
You've made an hominem attack on people.
No, a lot of people. That's a statement of fact. A lot of people do like stupid things.
Well, what
I mean,
makes
comedy
it stupid?
exists. It's stupid, but it's funny.
Well, that's your opinion that it's stupid, though.
Do you know what slapstick humor is?
I
I would
don't
assume you
think so.
do, but
I know what slapstick humor is.
Three
and
Stooges. It's stupid, but it's funny. That's what makes it funny.
I don't-
Is that
I
it's
don't
stupid?
think I don't think it's funny or stupid.
That's your persuasive liking or disliking of
Yeah.
something. That has nothing to do with what I said, though.
Yeah.
The style of comedy is
What I'm
slapstick
saying is,
comedy. Whether
he
you find it
said-
funny or not is irrelevant to the fact that it's the style of
He
comedy,
said-
and there are people who like it.
He said a lot of people like these online games.
A lot
you
of people
said-
like Volvos. A lot of people like, I don't know, freaking acacia trees. Like, a lot of people like a lot
Well,
of
you should-
things.
well,
So it's
Your
irrelevant.
argument should have been just because a lot of people like it doesn't mean.
Well, I was going to go the Hitler route, but I figured that would be a little too
Well,
extreme.
Well, no, you would say, and I would actually kind of agree with this. Is just because a lot of people like something doesn't mean we should do it.
Yes, that's literally my comparison note without
You know,
actually
a lot
saying
of
it that
people
way.
like example, like naked women doesn't mean we should have more women be naked. You know,
Well,
you know, sometimes to prove a point, you have to go to the extreme. That's why I brought that
well,
up.
I know that's why I skipped Hitler's because I didn't want to go to the extreme. But
Yeah.
the point is that the argument of a lot of people like live service games is a bad argument. That's not a good argument because a lot of people like things that aren't good.
Correct.
That's the point. I just didn't want to have
Yeah.
to spend 3 minutes explaining
Yeah.
that. But yeah.
service games, as some people have said online, doesn't make any sense either. Live service games are a great way to get away from the real world. They are
So are offline games. What was your point?
about social interaction between players. Some people get married in them. Some people met their spouse in them and then got married in them.
Okay.
It's a really cool thing for a point in time in which you're having that social experience. And to destroy that just because you don't like them is very weird. I don't think that makes a lot of sense to me. I also don't think it makes sense the way that Ross is posing this is why it's going to pass. I think that's incredibly inflammatory and could lead to a lot of damage to both.
I mean, Ross isn't wrong, per se.
Well, Ross is very naive. He thinks that's going to be easy to pass something like that.
Well, he's what I'm saying is from what he is saying, like his stance, like this will happen, this will happen, this will happen, is probably from seeing multiple other things happen the same way. Like it's probably not new, and thus he's making a safe guess. He thinks I think this will pass because X, Y, and Z. It's not the same thing as saying it's guaranteed to pass because he already started out with saying I can't guarantee this will pass, but I think it'll pass.
And I'm not arguing with him. I'm just saying. If Ross thinks that, he's very naive.
Maybe. I think a lot of people are naive about a lot of things. Like this guy thinking he knows what he's talking about, but that's a different story.
What he's trying to stop, and to games as a whole. To say that the government just doesn't care and this is an easy win and we're going to get it through is disingenuous. You're talking about a multi-billion-dollar global industry. To think that the government isn't going to be meticulously looking through this and looking for flaws and holes is absurd. So I don't think that's honest at all, and I find it disgusting. So for everyone who's mad about
point.
I find it
That is
disgusting
my
is such a
point.
dumb term to say because it's not a pile of poop on your plate that you have to eat for dinner. It's a freaking concept. If you don't like it, then offer a better one. The entire time he complains about it, but never does. This is the difference between criticism and constructive criticism.
I agree with you. He's not being very constructive. He spends about 30, 40 seconds talking about, he keeps saying that's not the actual problem, that's the problem. And this is the flow of his video. Like he said about 50 times, that's not the actual problem. He spends 30 seconds talking about what he perceives to be the actual problem. And
Yeah. Well, no, he spent the whole thing what he perceives as the problem, but never understood the actual argument to begin with. And like in debates, if you have somebody you're competing with them in debates, they
Well,
have an argument, you
so-
have an argument. But if you misrepresent their argument, they're going to come up and say, "Hold up, that's not what I
so
said
the
at all."
video, since his video is basically done,
Yeah, it's got like
I think his solution that from that limited 30 seconds is that there should be legal changes such that if a game is can run at all standalone, it should be against the law to brick them. Okay.
that's
And
that's basically it is. Is like if it can be done from like
Yeah.
local installation and whatever, then just
Yeah.
let them do it local installation.
He is perceiving that this bill is going to say any game, including stuff with online components.
That's
or
what I
even
said.
check-
He's not putting this into consideration because live service only games where they have nothing, not if it's marketed as one, but it has nothing on your computer where you can play it offline, because that's the
But-
crew's argumentation
Yeah.
is we can play it offline. If that's the case, then by definition, it doesn't matter how they market it. There's actual files. When I go to Steam and I install a game, I'm installing gigabytes of something. I'm
Well,
not.
Steam will-
It's not just.
Steam
It's not
games-
a UI. UIs don't cost that much.
No,
Freaking.
well, you'll be surprised, but
Well,
but-
unoptimized, sure, but
it's not so much unoptimized; it's bullet code.
well, sure. But if I'm downloading Call of Duty 6 and it's 186 gigabytes, that's not UI.
Well, no, if you
It's
not
terrible
to sidetrack,
optimization, but
if you were to look at the actual coding for, say, League of Legends, of what you download for it, right?
sure.
You're gonna find like 10% of it actually does the job, and the other 90% is documentation, like
Sure.
explaining
And,
what
and,
everything does.
and that's fine, but no
Yeah.
one, as far as I'm aware, no one's arguing for live service only games to be held offline.
Yeah.
That's not the
Well,
argument, and he's making it the
he-
argument. That's not the argument.
He perceives it to be that way, is my perception, and
You
I will not be
perceived it that he
surprised.
perceived it. That's your perception.
I would not be surprised based on that if his gaming company does those online only games.
There is a part two to this, but we're not going to get to it because it's another 8 minutes.
We can do that next week or whatever.
If you want to do it next week, we can do it next week.
That'll be next week's 5-hour show.
Well, I don't think this was 5 hours, but
Yeah.
we're only at past 2.5 hours, so we're not doing too bad.
Well, I have
all
to say,
things-
what extended this video is your outrage every 15 seconds.
because it's stupid that he makes bad arguments and then thinks it's a good argument, and then
I agree with you. He's making his video and points at issues, but I think
there would have been so much better of a video if he's like, "Here's how I perceive this.
But you kept.
I need to
circling-
understand this," and then from there, being like, "Okay, now that I have a better understanding by going to the people who actually," because he could easily just reach out to Ross and say, "Hey, Ross, could you explain this to me a little bit better in more detail?" And then Ross comes on and he does a video with him. Then he does another video afterwards to say, "Okay, now that he's explained this to me in a way that I can understand, here's how I would do it. Not that I would support it, but here's how I would do it if I wanted to care about the industry." That's what he
see-
should do.
You are. I think.
I
again,
would do that, except I'm not part of the industry. He's part of the industry, so I don't know what his excuse is.
I'm saying with the video, the reason it took 5 hours is you.
I
If
talk,
you had let
well,
him
we also
talk
talked
before
about a
you-
whole bunch of stuff that had nothing to
Yeah.
do with it.
Well, because we kept getting sidetracked because of.
Sidetracked, yes.
Well, I want to say something
legal,
offline.
but yeah.
Well, I want to say something offline though. Well, let's
Yeah,
finish the
we'll,
video.
we'll talk afterwards. But well, we don't have to finish the video. It's just him waxing for another
I mean our video.
19 seconds. It's another 19 seconds. So
I don't
it's
mean his video. I mean our video.
our video, comrade.
Yes.
But yeah, nothing. We still gotta watch the 8-minute one we can do for next week or whatever, and I'll put out
Yeah.
other videos until then. And
Unless
whatnot.
something else comes out intro, maybe we can do the A11 fast and get another
Well,
video. in
we could
whatever.
probably do 2 topics in the next one because I have
Yeah.
plenty of topics to talk about. But ultimately speaking, this was an incredibly unhelpful thing, and maybe he'll talk about this in a second video. I don't know why he didn't think about this to begin with. I don't know, but I like when he posts things on Twitter. It's a lot of, "Do you like this?" And I'm like, what? Every time somebody says yes and you disagree with them, you come in and say, "Why did you do this? This is going to destroy the world. We're never going to know anything. They'll never make cheese again." Like,
By the way,
whatever he's doing, it just doesn't make
Twitter
sense.
is a license only software, so you know.
Sure. I'm not installing anything
you
on
post
my
on
computer.
Twitter, you don't own.
I own the screenshots. Suck it.
Actually, but anyway,
Yeah, we'll get to that another time. But anyway, that'll be it for this particular rendition.
we actually kept on topic pretty good though. Usually sidetracked with
Yeah,
like all
but
sorts of
I
weird
hate
religious
talking about
stuff.
the legal aspect because it's going to almost always degrade into politics, and I hate talking about politics
Well,
because it's annoying.
there's a lot of like I'm not gonna say you're not as well read as I am, but
I'm probably
maybe
not as well read as you. I have no
you
problem
know
saying that. But
because you're a really smart guy. Okay,
I'm a, at the moment, talk person. I'm not a, I just have thousands of books
you know,
stored in the back of my brain.
well,
That's all reserved for a
I
Wheel of
have a
Time and
habit,
Lord of the
not so
Rings.
much lately, of reading anything. Like if I was at in a
I don't have
doctor's
time to
office,
read anything.
if I was in a doctor's office and there was a medical journal sitting, I'll pick it up and start reading it. You know,
I wouldn't do that.
I need if I see something that could be read.
I'm
and have
usually
time, I will.
studying about like science, philosophy, religion, and that kind of stuff. But I'm listening to videos. I'm not reading on it. I'm listening to
I
people
do
talking
that
about sources.
too,
But
but
no, I'm saying that's all
um,
I have time to do. So if I'm out and about doing that, that's what I'm doing because I can do that while I'm
there's
walking or whatever.
always time to read. Like if
There
you're
is
sitting in,
literally not. That's like my life. Literally, I don't have time.
well, no, I mean, do you ever like go to the doctor's office and have to wait?
No.
What do you
And,
know?
and,
You
and if
never
I
go to the doctor's office?
do, I'm listening to that philosophy, science, and religion all the way.
Well, that's
I don't
reading,
even
right?
read game patch notes because I don't have time,
Yeah.
dude. You don't
Yeah, I
understand.
cannot. Like when I buy a food, I have to read the ingredients. When I, you know, I said, so in the course of a life of that, combined with having the ability to read very fast, expansive vocabulary, and at one point a photographic memory, which I don't have anymore, um, thanks to nerve damage and shit. Um, like I absorbed a lot of shit in my first 30 years of life, and I read a lot about legal structure and legal theory
My best
and
friend's really good at just throwing knowledge into his brain, but most of it I consider useless knowledge because it's like, did you know this fact about beetles of this type? And it's just like
if you want to know
not
how bad it
particularly
is,
useful unless you're in that field, and he's not in that
if you
field, so I don't
if
know.
you want to know how bad it is, so I'd be vague about how I answer this because of HIPAA.
Well, how about this? I'll close the video out and you can tell me later. But
oh no, I would still not violate
I know
HIPAA.
I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
I have to close the video because I got get
Close
things
video.
going. So
Yeah.
anyway, thank you everybody. Like, comment, subscribe, all that fun jazz. Join the Discord, game giveaways, all that fun stuff. No one's gonna be at the end of this video, so they're not gonna hear it. But if you do, there might be a game for you. Who knows? All that fun stuff in the Discord. Discord's going to be the place I'm probably the most active over Twitter/X and YouTube because Discord I can do all times, regardless if I have a camera in front of me or anything else. So I will be there probably more often than not. So if you'd like to come hang out or chat or something, let me know. But yeah, thanks for everybody for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, all that fun jazz. Check out Matt's stuff. You got stuff on Thursdays and Wednesdays, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Wrestling tomorrow night. Wednesday night overbooked.
He'll be down in the description of his channel, so you can hop over there. Check out Crimson Law and his channel if you like anime. He does stuff for that, so check that stuff out. Thanks everybody for hanging out, and we'll hopefully see you in the next one and see what other videos I have coming out in the week. So thanks everybody. Remember, walk in the light.